across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
There you are. It's still few. What a scorcher out there. Hot as hell. Good afternoon and welcome to Drive Time right here on Talk. Stand by for 3 thrilling hours of news, views and topical debate. I'm your host, Kevin O'Sullivan, and I'll be with you all the way to 7 o'clock. Get involved. Get on the phone and call me on 0344 499 1000, or you can WhatsApp voice note me on the same number and I promise to play your message out. That is 0344 499 1000. It is Wednesday, May the 27th. Here's what's coming up. The old man of New Labour declares war on current Labour as former Prime Minister Tony Blair slams Keir Starmer for getting pretty much everything wrong in a lurch to the left that has consigned broken Britain to the international relegation zone. In an excoriating 5,600-word essay that has sent shockwaves through the government, Blair calls for an immediate ditching of crazy Ed Miliband's deranged nut zero madness and to stop the boats, whatever it takes. It's not often you'll hear me say this, but I agree with Tony Blair. Do you? 0344 499 1000. Meanwhile, Reform UK are fighting like rats in a sack over deportation, and deportation fanatic Rupert Lowe's Restore Britain's party stand accused of serious anti-Semitism. 0344 499 1000. In other news, carnage on the coast as Britain's beaches turn into war zones in the heatwave. Family days out by the seaside ruined by hordes of marauding thugs getting together via the dubious magic of so-called link-ups. Plus, militant doctors vote to go on strike for the 16th time. 16. Unsweet 16. Also, the trouble with oh-so-woke Australia, and doubts grow over Nicola Sturgeon's claim that she knew nothing, I know nothing, of her husband's bizarre spending spree and never set eyes on that £120,000 motorhome. Really? Do you believe her? 0344 499 1000. A witness has come forward to say they saw the former Scottish First Minister standing beside that motorhome. So more doubt cast on her version of events. Queen of Scots, Nicola Sturgeon, reduced to a figure of fun, to be honest with you. Nobody believes her. 0344 499 1000. All that and so much more. So don't go anywhere. Stick with me right here, right now on Talk, the home of free speech and common sense. Let's spend Wednesday afternoon together, and let's go straight over to my first guest from the Centre for Migration Control, where he is the research director. A big warm welcome to the show to Robert Bates. Hi, Robert.
Afternoon, Kevin.
Good to have you on the show. Well, I need to get your take first on certainly the big political story of the day, Tony Blair's intervention, in which, in a 5,600-word essay, he has basically slammed Keir Starmer for pretty much everything, talking about the madness of our overspending on welfare, saying that if Labour won't have any chance to win the next election, they must stop the boat, whatever it takes, and that generally this lurch to the left, this continuing lurch to the left, which will be made probably worse by Andy Burnham, well, not probably, as a matter of fact, is in the process of reducing Britain, once Great Britain, to the international relegation zone. He says this government, Keir Starmer, has no plan, never had any plan, and frankly, they have been one long 22-month disaster. Pretty incendiary stuff from the former Prime Minister.
Well, I think unfortunately for the country, when Tony Blair became Prime Minister, he did have a plan. That plan was the absolute upturning of everything that made our country great and setting us on a very, very perilous path of which we are still seeing many of the ramifications. I do think his diagnosis of Starmer's time in number 10, his dwindling time in number 10, is probably accurate. I think this is an individual who, let's not forget, during the Labour leadership contest after Jeremy Corbyn stood down, did try and court the Corbynite faction and was sort of very, very much presenting himself as a left-wing radical, and he's since abandoned a lot of that and then almost tried to present himself as the exact opposite, someone on the right. And I think he's basically now just become an ideological vacuum. I think he probably actually always has been an ideological vacuum, and that has meant that he has been buffeted by world events, by domestic events, and never really been in control, and he's not been setting out any clear vision for the country. And I think this is unfortunately for the country why it's very likely that we will end up with either Andy Burnham or Wes Streeting, individuals that are able to articulate a vision for the country and speak with a lot more passion about where they want to take us. Now, where they want to take us is probably, again, continuing Blair's doom loop, but I think, unfortunately, that is where we will be heading. And really, actually, his only proposition to the country, his only suggestion of what he offered was ending Tory rule. And Blair is continually doing this now, more and more frequently, sitting on the sidelines and sort of commenting with an air of a man that's been there and done that with such aplomb, and as if his reputation is impeccable. And I think he's also launched broadsides on Andy Burnham. I think that will actually, for the Burnham campaign, be probably something that they're quite grateful for. I think they'll think, well, it gives us a chance to distance ourselves from someone that is incredibly unpopular with the Labour members, but also incredibly unpopular with the country at large. So I think Blair's interventions come along with increasing frequency. They cause a couple of days of conversation, but whether actually anything he said that is sensible on the small boats is heeded, it really remains to be seen, because I can't see it myself.
I mean, you're right about Tony Blair. I mean, arguably he ruined Britain. As you say, he did have a plan when he came into power, probably too much of a plan. Lots of these social reforms, globalisation to the extreme, and almost obsessive devotion to the EU, and so on and so forth. His introduction of hate crimes in the late 90s, 1997, 98, I think it's probably the worst innovation that this country has endured for centuries, an absolute sea-changing disaster to this day. So he changed this country for the worse. That said, when you listen to him, I mean, Tony Blair, I didn't like pretty much everything he stood for. But when you boiled Tony Blair right down, he was a pragmatic man capable of common sense. And that is what he's lashing out at today. He is talking for all of us when he says, I just do not understand this net zero insanity. Why are we prostrating ourselves on the ground and making life difficult for ourselves, reducing ourselves to mud hut dwellers, to make the planet better, to save the planet, when we only produce less than 1% of the world's carbon emissions? We've already done our net zero job, our conservationist job, our ecological job, and yet Miliband wants to take us further and further and further into the economic abyss of his deranged, incoherent energy insanity. Well, for speaking out on that, I do think we owe Tony Blair a favour.
Yeah, well, I think the fact that he has, as you say, he is a pragmatist first and foremost. I think the fact that he has sort of read the writing on the walls and realised that is where the country is in terms of its viewpoint, but also actually where the country's interests are. The two don't always necessarily go exactly hand in hand. Suggests, that this is now a failed experiment. But of course, we do, not to go back to again how disastrous '97 was for the country. We do live in a Blair-defined era still, and a lot of the problems, such as net zero, such as immigration, and asylum in particular, were very much put in place and created and curated under his time in number 10. And I think actually a lot of the threads that we're currently seeing, you can trace back to what he was trying to do when he was Prime Minister, when it was perhaps more popular to be more about sort of global warming and ecological stuff and so forth. And I think it always smacks to me as an incredibly rich sort of approach from Tony Blair, sort of done without any sense of self-awareness as to actually his involvement in any of these problems. And I think it's an individual that is very high on his own views. But I do think Ed Miliband needs to be told from every quarter when it comes to net zero now. But he seems to be digging in on this agenda that, frankly, everyone can see. Even people that probably, 10 or so years ago were voting Green Party when it was a bit softer and a bit nicer, are seeing that this is something that is taking our country into fiscal ruin. It is a self-imposed handcuffs, whereas other countries around the world, particularly those like China, are laughing at us effectively because we've unilaterally surrendered so much of our sovereignty, whether it's on heavy industry or whether it is on energy production, on the altar of this ridiculous agenda. But again, just to go back, it was very much well and truly set in train by Tony Blair.
Yeah, I mean, he was very keen on open borders, mass migration, the mass movement. He liked the idea, certainly of European nations, anybody in Europe being able to go wherever the hell they liked. And that has set the scene for our current migrant crisis. As we attempt in some way to close our borders, but not very successfully. And now Blair has the temerity to say you must stop the boats, whatever it takes. Well, the boats are arguably Tony Blair's fault.
Well, exactly. I mean, the destabilisation of the Middle East and the consequences of that, even over 20 years hence, are well and truly on his shoulders. And this, again, is an individual that isn't seen to be taking account for any of his decisions made whilst in office. I do think, when it comes to the freedom of movement, let's not forget that Tony Blair made Britain in the EU an international outlier when he effectively in 2004 decided to just throw open the doors straight away to the new accession countries rather than putting in place a staggered approach. And that had huge impacts on the labour market and on pressures, especially at the lower wage end of things, and in many ways fomented a lot of the discontent that does continue to define in many ways our politics, and people's lack of faith just in the idea that politicians are operating on behalf of the national interest and British people. I think that rupture really started to emerge during his tenure, and we've seen it continually compounded ever since under both Labour and Tory colours. But this is a man that has done so much damage to our country that even if I do agree with him, I find it very, very difficult to say that I do agree with him, just because he is an individual that has done so much.
You don't like him, do you, Robert? Let's cut to the chase. This is Tony Blair, Sir Tony, I should say, speaking to Times Radio this morning.
By the end of this decade, if we don't stop this explosion in claims of working age people for incapacity disability benefit, we're going to have almost 5 million people, and the state's got to carry that cost. And if you look at where it's coming from, a large proportion of it is from mental health. And you compare us now with other countries, it's not the same. So you've got to, if you're looking at the situation of the country in a rational way, you've got to come to terms with some of these problems, and you can't just hope that they solve themselves, or that you can carry on with this big cost on welfare at the same time as you're trying to prioritize investment in education, in infrastructure, and of course in defense.
I'll tell you one thing, Robert, his voice has not aged well, has it? He sounds like the old man of the sea or something. Very, very old voice, but an interesting intervention today. Let's talk about, your specialist topic, if you like, your specialist subject, the migrant crisis. Since Friday, more than 1,000 migrants have crossed the channel. I happen to know that as we speak, last couple of days, it's absolute bedlam on the North French coast at the moment. Dinghies everywhere, police everywhere, these migrants. This is as we speak. So these are more people preparing to come across, as we always said. While the Labour government was saying, you see, our crackdown is starting to take effect. No, it was because we've had a very bad weather for the last couple of months. Last 2-3 weeks, no crossings whatsoever because of the weather. Suddenly, we've got these boiling hot mill pond conditions. Guess what? They're coming over hundreds and hundreds every day. So this government, among the many other crises it's failed to solve, its handling of the migrant crisis is frankly a sick joke.
It is, and I do think they have played every single possible card that they could possibly play. I think they've had the deals with France. They've tried the seizing of assets on the continent. They've tried the international cooperation with intelligence communities. They've put everything on the table, and yet we are still seeing huge numbers. 1,000 in just a few days is absolutely crazy. I think they really made themselves hostage to fortune in that period where there was somewhat of a lull in small boats crossings. Of course, in part that was because the people smugglers were having to try and work out how they can continue operating and workarounds against some of the meagre measures that had been introduced by the government and the French. But in no way actually was that a significant concern for them. But then, of course, there was the big issue of the weather. And lo and behold, the sun comes out and we see 1,000 individuals pop across to be put up in a land of Riley in this country with no end in sight. We know, frankly, at this point that there's no chance of anyone really getting removed from this country. The deportation rate of small boat migrants is criminally low. It's about 5%. And then, of course, we've got individuals disappearing left, right and centre. We've got hotels still operating, but people being shifted into HMOs, putting pressure on housing there. And we've got an escalating £5 billion fiscal bill. This is a situation that's just continuing to spiral, because it's not just the numbers coming across right now. It is, of course, a compounding problem. We already have 200,000 individuals that haven't crossed the channel, most of them still here, most of them still having to be put up in home office accommodation, or if they've been granted refugee status, social housing. So the situation now is likely to get more and more dire as we almost reach the limits of what our capacity allows us to do in this situation, in particular on housing. I think the government are going to have a huge problem in finding the necessary accommodation going forward, especially if they're saying they're going to shut hotels, continuing flows, and this is going to just cause new crisis spikes over the course of the next parliament.
Exactly right. Before you go, let me get you on energy prices. We'll go back to our friend Crazy Ed Miliband, the Net Zero Secretary, who I seem to recall, when Labour won that election 22 months ago, promised us that his energy policies, his clean air energy policies, would result in our energy bills absolutely plummeting the more we relied on renewables, windmills and solar panels. Well, they've been constantly going up ever since. And now we are set for the steepest summer rise in energy charges for 4 years. The price cap, the energy price cap for Britain is to climb by 13%. The government's saying, well, it's the Iran war, isn't it? It's not our fault. It's not the point. You promised us that energy bills were going to come down. They're going to go up as of July by about £220 a month, £1,862 a year. That's an extraordinary rise.
And one that was entirely avoidable. This idea of just pinning it on the Iran war. Well, guess what, chaps? Things do happen around the world that do cause supply chain difficulties. You need to have a country that is able to cope with them. And this is the Energy Secretary who has launched a full-blown attack on our own ability to make use of huge natural resources that we do have. In particular on fracking, he's effectively closed down the last fracking well that we do have up in Lancashire, and he's effectively said, no, let's pour cement down that. Let's not take the gas out that would bring down people's prices and actually help us, rejuvenate some industry that is suffering mainly because we are imposing such huge energy costs on them. No, let's fill that full of cement, and let's just hope that things remain calm in a very, very uncertain world. It is absolutely foolhardy, and it just shows that, we were talking about pragmatism with Blair. This government does not have a semblance of pragmatism when it comes to energy policy. In particular, they are so heck bent on going after these arbitrary targets that will not better anyone's pockets, better anyone's lives if we somehow manage to reach net zero. I won't suddenly wake up one day and think, thank goodness I live in a country with net zero. It won't make a blind bit of difference. But yet this seems to be what Ed Miliband is telling me is the single most important thing to accomplish in the country. It's lunacy.
Yeah, if we could just start drilling, exploiting North Sea gas and oil as much as possible, and then start fracking, our energy bills will come down by about 80%. Instead, because of his zealotry, his virtue signalling madness about net zero, we have the highest energy bills in the Western world. Thank you very much, Mr. Ed Miliband. But thank you seriously to you, Robert. Great stuff as always. Thanks for coming on. That's Robert Bates, the Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control. Let me know what you think about the migrant crisis. By the way, look, by the end of this week, I'll tell you, we're talking about 1,000 coming over since Friday. I think by the weekend it'll be 2,000. There's loads of them. I happen to know, I've seen footage. There are thousands of them walking up and down the beaches of North France around Calais. There's going to be a serious armada and invasion this week because of this good weather. Let me know what you think about that. 03444999000. When Tony Blair says to Keir Starmer, you must stop the boats, whatever it takes, what in your view would it take to stop the boats? 03444991000. We're going to go back to Tony Blair's incendiary intervention into Labour today and talk to former Labour spokesman James Mathewson next.
Came home with
The Crown is facing its gravest test in decades, and the royalty from Talk is your front row seat. With royal reputations under pressure and probing questions about public trust, we unpack every twist and revelation with the biggest names in the business. From the throne room at Buckingham Palace to a mansion in Montecito, we follow every royal ripple. Never miss a moment of The Crown in crisis. Subscribe to the royalty from Talk on the app or wherever you get your podcasts.
If your other half came home with £125,000 worth of motorhome, wouldn't you go, darling, where did you get that from? Yeah. Have that turned up on the driveway? Where did you get the motorhome from? It's a very expensive motorhome. £81,000 Jaguar, Volkswagen Golf, partly funded with stolen cash, luxury watches over 9,000 quid, Mont Blanc pens, a £3,232 coffee machine. What was the man doing?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Breaking news today, this afternoon, the doctors, militant doctors, have voted to go on strike for the 16th time. So we'll be dealing with that story later in the show. But first, let's go back to Tony Blair's incendiary intervention today, basically really slamming Keir Starmer. He says, changing the leader won't make any difference. But it's pretty clear Tony Blair doesn't want Keir Starmer to be the leader anymore. He really laid into our current Prime Minister. Let's get the take, or shall we say, from the Labour side of the fence. I think he is no longer a member of the Labour Party because he's a man of principle. He is a former Labour spokesman, James Mathewson. Hello, James.
Hi, Kevin. If you could refrain from calling me a man of principle again, you'll do my credibility on the left serious damage.
I'm sorry. Yeah, it's James Mathewson. I really hate him. He's hopeless. How's that?
That's better.
Thank you very much. Good to have you on the show, James. Seriously. Well, you know, we don't need to have a dispute today like we usually do. What is your view on Tony Blair's pretty incendiary intervention today?
I think there's two things here, right? Tony Blair's right about Keir Starmer. I don't think Keir Starmer should be the leader of the Labour Party. I don't think Keir Starmer is really the leader of the Labour Party at the moment. I think that's pretty clear to everyone. Everyone's waiting on Andy Burnham coming in and being coronated for that. However, this doesn't mean that we need to hear from Tony Blair right now, because I would say the only time we need to hear from Tony Blair is when he's going to be apologising for the Iraq war and owning up to his past errors of judgment that caused the Labour Party so much damage, and indeed the country. So I don't want to hear from Tony Blair, but I will say a stopped clock is right twice a day, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's exactly the way I feel. I'm afraid it's a 5,600-word essay, and I agreed with a lot of what Tony Blair had to say. And frankly, you know, he said, oh, well, we're changing leadership, you know, obviously referring to the possibility of Burnham taking over at number 10. Blair says that won't make any difference, but if you read this essay, and if Tony Blair wants it to have any effect, the effect it would have to have would be the defenestration of Keir Starmer. This is one long attack on Starmer's regime, calling him a man with no plan and a man with an incoherent approach, and so on and so forth. And net zero, he's particularly strong against. This is targeted at Starmer. He says a leadership battle won't make any difference, but it seems that Blair wants Starmer to go.
Well, yeah, but you see what Tony Blair's been doing for a long time, and a lot of your viewers might not know this. He has this global institute, right, the Tony Blair Global Institute, where basically every former Labour staffer in the world gets a job, right, except me, by the way. I don't think I'm going to do myself any favours.
You won't be getting a job after today, that's for damn sure.
Definitely not. But you go there, and what you do is you write policy papers about everything and anything, and then they somehow end up on the desk of whichever Labour Prime Minister happens to be in office and whichever Labour leader. And then they're expected to consider those papers into the policy, right? Tony Blair wants to play all sides of the fence. In fact, there was a book written recently, I can't remember exactly the name of the author, I'm sorry to you if you're listening, about what would happen if Reform won. One of the most interesting scenarios I heard in that book as an idea is that Tony Blair would be sending policy papers to Nigel Farage, because he still would be. That's what he wants to do. He likes to influence things. However, with this, his talk about trying to pitch to the right and to people like you, Kevin, unfortunately, I think is the wrong strategy. I think he's trying to keep his hands in all the different pies at the same time. I think the strategy of Andy Burnham being a change candidate and distinctly change in the direction of, you know, progressive politics, in the direction of trying to stand for something rather than nothing like Keir Starmer, is much better than any idea Tony Blair's ever had. So
you disagree with Blair's contention that Starmer's incoherent lurch to the left borrow Blair's. Well, no, I'm talking about Blair's terms. He's called it an incoherent lurch to the left, which he said has reduced Britain to the international relegation zone. You disagree with Blair's contention that lurching to the left is wrong?
Yeah, and also, what lurch to the left? Nobody on the left.
That's a good point. What lurch to the left?
That's the thing. Why are they all voting for the Green Party then if Keir Starmer is such a Marxist, according to Tony Blair? Like, that's not the reality. Look, as somebody on the left, let me tell you, Kevin, I'm getting sitting wound up listening to you. You know I can only listen to so much of what you have to say before I came on. We're not going to
You're not the only one, James. Don't worry about that.
We're not going to debate all of our differences. But what I will say to you, nobody on the left I know, including myself, is happy with Keir Starmer. And they're also not that happy to accept Andy Burnham, by the way. I'm having to talk a lot of friends out of supporting the Greens in Makerfield, you know, because people want to see a radical change on the left. But the thing is, I think Andy Burnham is the only candidate who can bring both of those worlds back together, but I think he can do it without Tony Blair's help.
Do you agree, to get into at least one detail in this huge, long essay written by Mr. Blair, do you agree with his idea that the Labour government should ditch net zero?
I don't. I'm not across energy policy. I've always liked the idea of net zero just because it is taking responsibility for our climate pledges around the world and all the rest of it. But with net zero itself as a policy, I wouldn't be opposed to seeing it reformed and changed and doing something more significant. But I will say something. Those who come on and who push against net zero a lot of the time from the oil industry, from the fossil fuel industry, I don't want to see that industry shut down overnight. I don't want to see communities devastated like happened in the northeast where I'm from with coal. But what I want to see is a transition to green energy, because we need to be pro-green energy for the future. Throwing the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, is never going to help anyone.
What but Blair's essentially saying, I talked about him launching a kind of full-scale attack on Starmer's administration, but I think also implicitly it was an attack on the idea of Burnham taking over and taking the government to the left. I was going to say even further to the left, but as you say,
Yeah.
it hasn't really been very left-wing, hasn't really been anything at all. But in terms of Andy Burnham, it's quite clear that Blair doesn't fancy him taking over either. I think it was a sort of twin-pronged attack. Starmer has been useless, but if you put left-wing Burnham in, it can only even get worse.
I think, honestly, right, Tony Blair is a man, he's a businessman now. That's what we need to acknowledge with Tony Blair, first and foremost. He's a businessman, right? And I think he's playing both sides of the fence. I think especially he is trying to endear himself to Reform and to Nigel Farage. I think that's what he's trying to do, to try and have an ear there and try and have influence there. And as a result, he's attacking the left and saying the Labour Party should be more right-wing. We've got plenty of options. If you want to vote for an anti-immigration party, if you want to vote for the kind of politics that you espouse here on talkTV, Kevin, rightly or wrongly, you've got options for that. You've got Reform, you've got Restore, you've got bloody right-wing parties coming out your ears. What you don't have right now is a real serious progressive force in British politics. And listen, we should all want plural politics. We should want everyone to be able to be represented, no matter which side of the fence you sit on.
I mean, if Burnham gets in, right, what I'd like, you know, even though I probably hate everything he ever does, but if he's got a plan and a coherent direction of travel, then it's going to be a great improvement on this kind of straw man who doesn't know what the hell he's doing right now. So
that's what I hear continually. Look, the people even on the right who disagree with how I want to do things fundamentally, but what they get most frustrated at is the fact that Keir Starmer doesn't stand for anything. He doesn't come down on any side. You can at least respect somebody who stands by their values.
Couldn't agree more.
Makes them work in government.
Couldn't agree more. Can I have a last comment from you, James, if you've got one? Let's talk about just Tony Blair. I mean, what an ego. You know, he was Prime Minister for a long time, very electorally successful. Well done. But here he is, what is it now, 20 years on? Why is he still, you know, why does he still seek to stick his nose into Britain's business?
Well, I was just trying to formulate a nice way of saying it, Kevin.
Yeah, remember, family show, James, family show.
Yeah, I have to say this. Tony Blair is a narcissistic vampire. That's the reality, right? He'll never want to seek being around, seek being around power, because that's what he does. It's what he thrives from. And I don't believe Tony Blair believes in anything. He used to have this core set of values, but don't forget, in the Labour Party, Gordon Brown, John Prescott, people like that, Robin Cook, they steered the ideology of the party, right? Blair was just there as the face, as the charisma, as the winner. Him and people like Mandelson, we should learn our lessons of letting them anywhere near power. So everyone should discard what he says, in my opinion. And the only thing I want to hear from Tony Blair is when he's going to appear at The Hague for his war crimes.
Yeah, and what they say about Tony Blair is if you're at a sort of social gathering with him and he's talking to you, he will give you his total attention until he sees someone richer elsewhere. So follow the money with old Tony Blair. James, really great to have you on. Thank you very much. James Mathieson there, former Labour spokesman, no fan of Tony Blair. Are you? What do you think about this intervention? Because I'm with James on this. I don't like Tony Blair. I didn't like anything he really stood for. I don't think he was a very good Prime Minister. I think he ruined this country. However, in this 5,600-word essay, it is hard to disagree with a single word, because basically he dismantles the uselessness of Keir Starmer's government. Directionless, no plan. What do you think? What are your feelings about Tony Blair? Should he have intervened? And do you agree with what he said? 0344 499 1000. Next up, Bedlam on the beaches, carnage on the coast. We're going to talk about these massive running fights that happened in beaches all over the country, particularly Bournemouth. Poor old Bournemouth getting it in the neck again, but also Southend, other places. Hordes of marauding thugs basically descending on beaches, ruining the lovely sunshine weather for families enjoying a day on the seaside. A growing problem. They were all meeting up due to this linked up system. So we'll talk about that next. Stay tuned.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Right, let's talk about Bournemouth. Let's talk about Southend, Broadstairs, all these lovely beach resorts in this extraordinary heat wave over the last few days. They have been descended upon. But look at this, if you're watching on TV, thousands and thousands of young people, many of them thugs, fighting, running around the beach, making it very unpleasant for the families who've gone out to enjoy the lovely weather at the seaside. This is happening all over the country, and it's getting worse because these young people, these crowds, are getting together through this new linked-up system. So these teenage gatherings are causing more and more problems. The police in Bournemouth in particular were almost overrun yesterday. Let's talk to former Met Police Detective Mike Neville. Yeah, Mike, what is it about the beach and good weather that leads to these kind of scenes? Now, they're a lot worse now, but I'm old enough to remember, you know, the mods and the rockers descending on Brighton Beach. This beach syndrome, young people gathering at the beach to have a punch-up on a bank holiday or in good weather, has been going on for decades, but it's getting worse. What do you think can be done?
Well, it is getting worse, you can say. We used to have the mods and the rockers on Brighton Beach, didn't we, and things like that. But the combination here, the factor here is that all these places are within striking distances of London. So there's a direct train route to Southend and to Bournemouth. And what you have here is, you know, I noticed in the Daily Mail you weren't allowed to comment. So one of the things, there's a lot of young black kids involved here. And a lot of the posters that are put up about this link-up thing are young black guys putting them up with machetes and stuff. And so we've got to be honest about what the problem is here, because otherwise, if you're not honest about the problem, you'll never solve it. And what you have is an issue where the police have been taught really at training school that they're racist and stop and search is a bad thing. And so a lot of these young people, you know,
I've got to say, sorry to interrupt, Mike, but I'm just looking at this footage. I mean, this is the United Benetton of colours.
Absolutely.
I'm sure there are black kids there, but there are
a lot. If you look at the footage, particularly from Southend, and you look at the posters that were put up for Southend, where it's got two young lads with a machete about the link-up thing, there's a real issue here that we've got to look at. Yes, there are kids. There's no Asian kids, I don't think, at all there. But there's a real problem going on. We saw it in Clapham recently.
Yes, that was a linked-up thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, there's the same sort of thing. And a friend of mine an ex-colleague of mine has just said he was in Bournemouth when this happened. And he described it as like being when he was a PC at Clapham. So he's there as a sort of an eyewitness, as you want. But there is a real issue here that we've got to deal with. In the police, they always talk about PC rain. PC rain always solves the problems and all sorts of events. But they're asked, as I say, when the newspapers don't allow people to comment on things, that's when you know something's going on. And I always fall back to this Douglas Murray's comment about the crime of noticing. And something's got to be done. The Dorset police, as you said, were almost overrun. They had to ask the Hampshire police officers to come and assist them at Bournemouth on Tuesday.
And this link-up thing, That's causing problems not only on the seaside. This is in America. It's getting massive. These thousands of kids just link up, as it were, get together, and just invade shopping malls and do exactly what they want. Now, here at the beach, at one point at Bournemouth Beach, there was one guy that clearly a gang of thugs were after. And they're just it's about 100 kids young men, chasing this one guy. And they're running through people's, picnic blankets, knocking over their windbreaks. Just real horror for, just ordinary families who want to go down and enjoy a day by the seaside.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my grandparents used to go to Bournemouth. They wouldn't recognise it. Would they recognise it? No, would they? They would not. One of the things the police have got to get on top of course, is social media. They've got to be aware of it, so they've got officers ready to deploy to these places. But it's unsurprising that these things happen because it's very, very hot and this attracts people. But as I say, to monitor social media, to know where the link-ups are going to happen, and then deploy it effectively so they can nip it in the bud. Because as you said, this occurred one little thing. And I watched the footage to see what I've been saying. You watch the footage of that young man being chased and you'll see what I was saying earlier.
Yeah, what can the police do about this? I mean, you know, we're often criticising the police, but I felt kind of sorry for them. They turned out in force in Bournemouth, but they looked, you know, police cars as far as the eye could see. But this scale of crowd just marauding round in a completely unruly way. I mean, how do you police something like that? It's very difficult, surely.
Well, one of the things they should be working with the British Transport Police, because these youngsters are travelling, I've no doubts, by train, as I said, by direct train. So they'll be able to see that, like with football fans, who's getting on at Clapham Junction, who's getting on at Waterloo, and therefore they've got an hour, 2 hours notice before they ever arrive. So the British Transport Police could coordinate with the different police forces as to what kind of youngsters and how many youngsters, mobs are getting onto the train. So they should know that. Monitoring social media, then declaring before these things happen that they've got these Section 60 orders, which allow the police to do stop and search without any grounds. They can just stop and search for weapons, because we saw somebody stabbed at Brighton as well. So these things could be put in place. The fact that they could they could have CCTV, extra CCTV deployed across the beaches, just to warn people. But as I say, they've got sufficient warning. It's a 2-hour journey down to Bournemouth from London.
What about, I mean, we haven't got any statistics, but looking at the footage and all the pictures, it doesn't look like many arrests were being made. What about like kind of mass arrests? That would put these kids off, wouldn't it?
I looked into that as well, Kevin. I did try to search, because normally the police make an announcement, don't they? Or made 15 arrests. Or no, there's no information of that. So I think the officers the officers on the ground were just so overwhelmed. They just
actually, this is just breaking news, Mike. You'll be astonished. You'll be astonished. Dorset police, they arrested 3 people. 3 arrests. Amazing.
Kevin, but the young officers on scene they're just that's not their doings. They're overwhelmed. 2 of them make an arrest, and there's only 4 of them dealing with a massive crowd.
But it reminds me, Mike, of Clapham a few weeks back when they linked up, when they steamed Clapham High Street. Yeah. There were about 300 of these kids doing exactly what they wanted, just shoplifting, running up and down the street, terrorising people, and the cops made 3 arrests. Well, surely the message to send would be to make, I don't know, 50 arrests. If you come down and do this, the likelihood is you'll get your collar felt. The fact that the likelihood is that you won't get your collar felt, surely that just encourages these young people.
Absolutely, but to make arrests, you've got to have sufficient officers to do it. Here you have 5 or 6 officers who are just utterly overwhelmed, who are just trying their best to disperse the crowd. Yeah. What they need now, they need to have an operation. In the Met, I did things where you scan that CCTV footage, identify those involved in the worst disorder, make sure they're arrested, and as you say, it sends out a clear message. But the first thing to do is to be prepared. You should have 50 officers there, not 5 who are suddenly overwhelmed. And that's not the young officers who are on the beach there. It's the senior officers who should be working in communication with the Met, because that's where these troublemakers are coming from. The chief superintendent from Bournemouth has said they're from outside the county. They're from London, no doubts. And the BTP who see them travelling down there. So there needs to be some real liaison and some social media monitoring to nip these things in the bud before they ever happen.
Mike, very good to talk to you as always. Thanks for coming on. Mike Neville, their former Met Police detective. A couple of statements here. This is Bournemouth Council. Incidents like this are taken extremely seriously, and we take a joined-up approach to antisocial behaviour and criminality, working alongside agencies to share intelligence, act quickly and target issues when they arise. Well, that's all very nice, isn't it? But there was no order kept on Bournemouth Beach. Nice statement, but that's chaos on the beach. What about the poor people just trying to enjoy themselves, take their kids down to the beach? You know, that's not really good enough. Here's Dorset Police's statement. Fast time work on the beach resulted in 3 arrests being made. A 22-year-old man from Tottenham in London was arrested on suspicion of possession of an offensive weapon in a public place. A 17-year-old boy from Southampton was arrested on suspicion of assault and affray, and a 17-year-old boy from the Portsmouth area was arrested on suspicion of affray. All 3 remain in police custody at this time. Well, hundreds, maybe thousands of kids or young thugs just marauding around the beach. 3 arrests. It's just, I mean, I feel sorry for those coppers because there's not enough of them. Mike Neville's quite right. Only a handful of coppers down there trying to deal with this massive crowd. Well, they should send a lot more coppers and make a lot more arrests. 3 arrests from what we saw. That's no good. That's not law and order. That's sending a message you've got every chance of getting away with this kind of behaviour. Right? 03444991000. Next up, we're going to talk about the new version of the hosepipe ban. You know, we have months and months of pouring rain, soaking wet, and then water companies say, well, you can't use your hose pipes. Well, there's a new ban in town. The water company has asked people not to fill up their children's paddling pools. Paddling fools, they've been called. They're telling people, oh, you don't have to fill your kids' paddling pool up, just halfway. This is Southwest Water, which has 90% full reservoirs and loses more than 1 trillion litres of water a day due to unrepaired leaks. Trying to blame parents for overfilling their children's paddling pools. Hey, Southwest Water, I think it's your fault, don't you think? Stop blaming your customers. We'll talk about that next. Stay tuned.
If your other half came home with £125,000 worth of motorhome, wouldn't you go, darling, where did you get that from? Yeah. Have that turned up on the driveway? Where did you get the motorhome from? It's a very expensive motorhome. £81,000 Jaguar, Volkswagen Golf, partly funded with stolen cash, luxury watches over 9,000 quid, Mont Blanc pens, a £3,232 coffee machine. What was the man doing?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just about the most annoying thing in the world is when water companies that waste so much water due to their failure to repair their leaks properly Tell us, it's a hose pipe ban. Usually it's after months of solid rain. We have about 2 minutes of sunshine and the water comes in. Right, you can't use your hose pipes, water shortage. Well, there's a new form of hose pipe ban in town. Water firm bosses for South West Water have demanded that parents only half fill the paddling pools of their children in this hot weather. To which you want to say, well, no, screw you, South West Water. Let me tell you, give you some statistics. Basically, South West Water leaks, listen to this, every single day, 107 trillion litres of water every day, thanks to unrepaired leaks. And after the wet winter and spring, South West Water, the company's reservoirs are 90% full. So why are they telling today, why are they saying now, only half fill your paddling pools? Screw you. No. You've got loads of water. Fix your leaks. Why is it that it's seeking to blame the consumers for water shortages? Absolute nonsense. Let's talk to the campaign director at Net Zero Watch, Maurice Cousins. Yeah, this is particularly annoying. This is the new version of the hosepipe ban. Only half fill your children's paddling pools in hot weather. Thank you very much, South West Water. As I just said, Maurice, they hemorrhage 107 trillion litres of water every day thanks to their own unrepaired leaks. This is classic trying to sort of shift the blame onto consumers. It's their fault, and only half-filling paddling pools won't make a blind bit of difference.
Yes, I mean you're right to highlight that there's been this weird shift in the UK over the last few decades where we seek to demonise consumer behaviour and to create these narratives these crisis narratives that always lead to greater intervention and restrictions on our ability to lead the lives that we want, and this is just yet another example.
Yeah, they should get their own house in order. Everybody knows that half-filling paddling pools won't make any difference whatsoever. This is just a kind of cosmetic optic trying to say, well, the reason we're short of water, the reason we have water shortages, it's these wasteful customers of ours. No. It is their fault. The leaks that these companies continue to kind of propagate are a disgrace, an absolute disgrace.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think you're right to actually focus on the cosmetic elements of this. I think it's easy to laugh at these sorts of stories, and you've seen this all week actually with the lovely weather outside. People trying to create various scare stories about it. But you're right to talk about how it's the focus on these sort of surface level explanations. I think actually this speaks to a much deeper problem actually within our body politic and more broadly culturally. I think there are three things I take away from it actually. One is there's this weird anti-abundance mindset that has sort of seeped in amongst policymakers and businesses. One of the things that we don't actually talk about is one of the reasons why we may have to ration water is because we've not actually built a major reservoir in this country since 1992. Meanwhile, the population of this country has grown by about 10 million people. So, supply has gone down, demand has gone up, and everyone then therefore has to, have their water supply rationed. But there's another problem here, which is, it seems that too often people are unable or incapable of confronting the root causes of problems that we face in a country, and we're only really dealing with sort of surface level issues. And the end result of that just means higher prices, lower supplies, and more precarity. It's quite depressing.
It really is depressing. Talking of which, I'm glad I've got you today because breaking news today, another failure by crazy Ed Miliband, the Net Zero secretary, to come good on his promise to send our energy bills plummeting. They've gone up yet again, really significantly this time. As of July, they'll be going up by £220 a month, more than £1,800 a year. This is massive. This is massive from a net zero energy secretary who promised us that his policies would give us much lower energy bills. They are rocketing.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's similar parallels with the other story that you've got there. You know, the spin from this government and others.
It's the Iran war. It's not our fault.
Oh, I know.
Right? Yeah.
You know. But again, they are deliberately and cynically conflating proximate causes, war and geopolitics, which can obviously lead to various spikes, with the much broader, deeper problem, the ultimate cause, which is policy. And you know, wars can obviously explain things like spikes, but what they can't explain is how before 2022 and before Iran, the UK had some of the highest industrial electricity prices anywhere in the developed world. And that is downstream from policy. It is because we are building a really inefficient power system, which means that the end result are higher electricity prices.
Yeah.
And you know, that's just on electricity. We're not even talking here about when it comes to things like fuel, where we are deliberately vandalizing the North Sea, and where we have deliberately hollowed out our refineries over 2 decades, which means we've gone from 12 to 4, and we've increased our reliance on foreign supplies for jet fuel and diesel. It's utter madness.
Well, Tony Blair has talked about the madness of this net zero policy by Ed Miliband today. Now, the kind of, if you cut to the chase, this 220 quid a month as of July, more than £1,800 a year, massive rise, massive. If we were fracking and we were exploiting North Sea gas and oil for all it was worth, our energy bills wouldn't be rocketing upwards, they'd be plummeting downwards. All we need is a shift to the sensible kind of policy that Tony Blair suggested today, and Bob would be our uncle. We'd have cheap energy prices.
Yeah, I think Tony Blair's essay, you don't have to be Tony Blair's biggest fan, but I would encourage all of your listeners to go off and read it. It's an eminently sensible document.
I agree.
And the central message really is abundance. If you ultimately want to be able to have lower bills and to be able to compete in this world where it's going to get more dangerous, and our power is downstream from the success of our economy, which itself is reliant on cheap energy bills, we are going to need more energy. And that means building an energy system that is based around dense, reliable supplies, not inefficient windmills and solar panels that don't produce the power when you need it.
Absolutely. Morris,
and vast amounts of infrastructure to support it.
With you, Morris. Really good to have you on the show. Thank you so much. Morris Cousin there, campaign director at Net Zero Watch. It is Baroness Claire Fox next. Stay tuned.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back for the next 20 minutes or so. We're going to spend it in the excellent company of Baroness Claire Fox. After that, we need to talk about the 16th industrial action by militant doctors. They're going on strike again. Patients will die because of this. How much longer are we going to let them get away with this? It's ridiculous. Letting patients die on the altar of industrial action. What are we thinking? If they're going to be like this, doctors, let's ban them from striking. Just a thought. 03444991000. Let's now go over, though, to the director of at the Academy of Ideas, former Brexit Party MEP, of course, and the author of I Find That Offensive, Baroness Claire Fox. Hi, Claire.
Hi, Kevin.
Well, first of all, this is genuine breaking news. It has just broken that Andy Burnham has now responded to Tony Blair's 5,600-word essay, which basically slams. It's just the headline on it is Starmer has been a disaster. Starmer's government never had a plan. Starmer's government is useless. He has various areas that he thinks need to be sorted out urgently. Net zero. He says stop the boats, whatever it takes, and so on and so forth. So he basically, this former Prime Minister, Labour Prime Minister, is saying to the current Prime Minister, you're useless. Underpinning that, though, he makes this big point of saying, you know, the Labour Party seems to be deluding itself that by changing leader, this will sort all our problems out. In other words, if you get Andy Burnham, that will be fine. Blair makes a point of saying, no, that is a delusion. It's not about leader. It's about having a plan. It's about having direction. It's about sort of believing in anything at all, which Keir Starmer clearly doesn't. Andy Burnham, I'll get you the full details. He's just responded and said Blair has no understanding of what is going on. First of all, Claire, what were your thoughts on what Tony Blair said or has written about Keir Starmer's government?
So the last time I was on your programme, I made very similar points. And I'm not suggesting that Tony Blair plagiarised me. But in other words, I have a huge amount of sympathy for what he says, which is peculiar. And I know that you've been making this point this afternoon, which is I'm hardly a Tony Blair fan. And certainly the first half of his rather overlong essay actually clearly states the much more profound problem that Labour has than just the technocrat, useless Keir Starmer as the Prime Minister. And I think it's quite interesting that Andy Burnham says he hasn't got a clue what's going on, because he actually does have his finger on the pulse, I think,
clearly
of what's gone wrong with the Labour Party. I mean, the one thing he does understand is the Labour Party, and he can see that it's become a soulless entity. And he makes a very good point about how you can't just be a weather vane that just kind of blows in whichever direction the voters want, or your backbench MPs or what have you. It's like, what do you believe? Lay out what you're going to do about it and govern. And that's the one thing that we have seen the Labour Party failing to do, and it's being challenged. Starmer's being challenged by, would you believe, somebody who has already done 3 U-turns, and he's not even a Prime Minister, he's not even an MP, and he's given in on things which he held so close to his heart, like rejoining the EU, his very ambivalent and insulting comments in relation to somehow it was women's fault for making all this fuss about wanting single-sex spaces. Oh, nobody changed his mind now because he knows that's palatable, and so on and so forth. So this guy is not a man of principle.
But he's not stupid, and I think he has hit the nail on the head about most of the things that are very, very wrong, or what have been.
I meant Burnham has got no principles. Sorry, let me be clear. I'm saying that's why Blair's right, and Blair is basically saying there's no point just having a kind of Starmer Mark II who just U-turns even before he's even got into power, and is kind of just trying to keep people happy. A people pleaser is not a leader. And Blair at least understands that you've got to have some philosophical belief in something, some sense of what you want the country to be like. And that's not anything we've seen from Starmer, and we're not being promised it by any of those challenging him either.
So, in a sense, this piece, this long essay by Tony Blair, is an attack on both Starmer and Burnham, because what he attacks the hell out of Starmer. I mean, he just says he's been useless on all fronts. And then says, but do not delude, let not the Labour Party delude itself that just changing leader, going over to Burnham will solve the problems. And actually, implicitly, he attacks Burnham as well, because Burnham will represent a lurch to the left. And he says lurching to the left will be a major electoral mistake. So Blair doesn't like Starmer, doesn't think Starmer should be the Prime Minister, quite clearly. But he also does not think Andy Burnham should take over.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the point is he says that you can't just keep changing prime ministers. It's not a personnel question. And therefore, if Starmer was being challenged by somebody who had a completely clear alternative vision for the country, I mean, even the lurch to the left is unconvincing. That's what I was trying to say, is that Burnham is basically saying what he needs to do to get elected. We know that he's got a lot of support from the left-wing backbenchers in the party, and we can fear what that might mean in terms of policy or not, but he's just not been clear on it. He just keeps saying, I'm one of you, I'm a local lad, I'm one of you, and I believe that people need change. And he says that regularly. I mean, how often did he say change and talk about himself when he was doing his opening speech? But it's not clear in what direction. What is it exactly that is going to change when he becomes the Prime Minister, other than that he will be even more in hock to the backbenchers who are supporting him at the present time? I'm unimpressed, I have to say.
But Blair, in terms of some of the particulars, he said, the Labour government, as a matter of some urgency, needs to ditch Ed Miliband's nut zero mania, because that is a massive vote loser. People don't vote for higher energy prices. People don't vote for saving the planet if it costs them a fortune. So he says, ditch that. He also says, well, don't lurch to the left generally, but he also says, you must stop the boats, whatever it takes. Now, these are good suggestions, but what do you think Burnham won't ditch net zero, will he? And I suspect because he'll be all attached to the ECHR and, the kind of woke open borders worldview, he won't stop the boats, whatever it takes either, will he?
So I think that on net zero, and it's worth saying that I don't agree with all of Blair's policy proposals, right? I'm not keen, for example, on his endless promotion of digital ID. But he is very clear about the fact that, in order to have any power in the world or any strength at home, any way or capacity to change things for people, you need an economy that's healthy. That requires growth. And growth is not feasible or possible while we are attached to net zero. He even makes the point, even though he's much more, of course, pro-EU than I am, he even makes the point, look, this is not serious politics. You can't just say we're going to just get closer to the EU and hope that will solve everything. Why are you trying to get closer to them? What is it exactly? And he makes the point, you won't be able to negotiate hard if you're coming from a position of weakness. In other words, it's an intelligent intervention. I mean, I don't agree with all of it, but, it's like written by somebody who's really thought through the crisis and the problems, and they're existential problems that the Labour Party is having, and therefore for the rest of us as citizens, we're having because they're in charge. They're running the country. So net zero is very important. I think on the immigration point, he understands that if you can't control the borders, and that no amount of rhetoric is going to just mean that you do control the borders, then actually you can't be a sovereign nation state of any strength that anyone takes seriously. And I think that it's interesting that Andy Burnham has said, oh, yes, I won't undo anything Shabana Mahmood has said. But the problem that Labour have got is that for all their talking tough on immigration, they're not prepared to take on the judiciary at home in terms of human rights, or to take on the ECHR, which is the point that you've just made. And these things are necessary. And also, there are a whole range of international agreements that we're signed up to, that would mean, like the Refugee Convention, that mean that we have no sovereignty when it comes to making decisions about migration questions. We're not able to do all the things that we promise. And we can see that even though more people might be refused visas, or actually turned down for asylum, they're still all living in the UK. They're all still here, right? I mean, there's no point having a policy that says you're not allowed to be here, but then doesn't actually remove you. Because you just have the growth of an illegal sector and economy and so on. That's what all those shops on the high streets are, all those vape shops that are springing up left, right and centre, and barber shops run by people who are here illegally.
I've just found, Claire, a fuller version of what Andy Burnham's response to Tony Blair was. He spoke to The Observer. He says that he believes Blair misunderstands the root causes of populism. He said, this is Andy Burnham talking about Tony Blair. This is quoting Andy. He doesn't mention inequality once. If you don't get how that's driving politics now, if you are not rooting your analysis in the fact that people are unable to live and that things that were taken for granted are no longer affordable, then you are not understanding what's going on. Andy Burnham, by the way, criticised 40 years of neoliberalism. Tony Blair was very fed up about that. He said, I assume he includes my government in that. So there's no love lost between Burnham and Blair. And we all want more equality. Nobody likes inequality, but I get very worried when I start hearing these socialists, these Labour people like Burnham going on about, oh, Tony Blair doesn't know what he's talking about, never mentioned inequality. It's too nebulous. It's too nebulous a concept to base your entire approach to politics around. We need practical reality, practical, real measures that make a difference, not just droning on about inequality.
And there's the thing about populism, the spirit of populism, not necessarily the way it's working out in terms of parties, which, to be honest, is less inspiring. The spirit of populism.
Yeah, populism. Yeah, I always like the way people say in political circles. You know, populism is a real pejorative term, and if you look at what the definition of populism is, the pursuit of policies that are popular with the people. Why is it that Westminster types hate that concept so much?
I know, but the spirit of populism is definitely to say we want better. But what the mistake is made is to always see it in terms of more economic, more money, in a way. And so when they say inequality, they don't understand that what people want is pride in the places that they live. They want to have their views taken seriously. They want their culture. It's a much more cultural question. It's about not feeling constantly that the traditions, the outlooks, the points of view that you have will be disparaged as somehow and sneered at and looked down upon. And so I think that what Andy Burnham sounds like is like some kind of social worker who wants to help the poor people out. And I think that's condescending, and it's he that misunderstands what's going on. And at least Blair says, look, they feel as though they're so uninvested in society, the vast majority of people, and I agree with him on this, that they've got, you know, when somebody says it's a bit of a risk voting for that populist chap over there, they say, well, you know, I'll take the risk. Because the status quo with you lot in charge is not something I'm prepared to tolerate anymore with this slow, incremental non-change.
Exactly. Now, here's something to get excited about, Claire, something for you to look forward to. Andy Burnham has pledged that tomorrow he will issue a considered response to Tony Blair's essay. So I'm on the edge of my seat. I don't know about you, but that really is very...
He's got a new communications team, and they'll be all writing away overnight. You know, let me show you, there's a whole range of those kind of lanyard class types who've kind of moved down to Makerfield, the constituency, not thinking it was a town and discovering it's a constituency. And they're all kind of offering their services so that he will have very slick response, I'm sure. But You should get him on here and do it. He can do it spontaneously.
Yeah. He said to me, he said, I want to come on Talk and I want to come on your show as much as possible. That's what Andy Burnham wouldn't say ever. But he's welcome on the show anytime if he wants to come on. I'd love that. But you never know. Now, I've got to be careful here because there's the Makerfield by-election and we're in Purdah rule. So we have to be very careful. So I just want to talk about reform and restore, not in terms of the Makerfield by-election, but there are fights on the right, Claire. What do you make of Reform UK's Zia Yousaf slapping down Robert Jenrick in public for, in Zia's belief, not getting Reform's deportation policy right on TV? Now, whether or not Jenrick got it right or wrong, I think is beside the point. I just think it's rather extraordinary for a party to be fighting in public like this. Surely the way you handle this is you phone up Jenrick and say, listen, mate, you got that slightly wrong. Be a bit careful in the future, and then handle it diplomatically. But this is like revealing a great big rats in a sack punch-up between various factions of Reform UK, isn't it?
It's unedifying, and it indicates a lack of discipline in the party, it would seem to me. And I hope that, they sort it out. I mean, I'm not... by the way, I'm no clearer at the end of this entirely what the policy is.
Nor am I. That's a good
I kept thinking, did Zia Yousaf? I've looked at their original policy and what Zia said. I wasn't entirely sure he was right either. But the point is, look, it is such a shame because I'm very positive about that spirit of populism, and it's looking for a vehicle, and Reform has until relatively recently been it, right?
Yeah.
And I would really hope that they get their act together. And I just think that this kind of spat in public isn't something that one associates with people who are serious. And I by the way, social media is great. I know it can be a sewer, but it can be a pain in the neck. And people say stupid things. But I do think people who are leading political parties should not be resolving their problems on social media. I'm all for transparency, but that just strikes me as being kind of immature. So it's a real shame because I'm actually, I think Zia Yousaf is very impressive.
Oh, they're a great media performer. I agree.
And I actually think, despite everyone moaning about him being a Tory, that Robert Jenrick's been a great asset, right, to Reform.
Yeah.
So I really would prefer that if they're going to have some sort of like boys falling out thing, that they would do it behind closed doors. We're not interested, and it's doing damage, and they shouldn't have done it.
It does come across as a little bit amateur hour. And Rupert Lowe, his party Restore Britain, has been accused of sponsoring extreme anti-Semitism. Now, there's one character called Steve Laws who's kind of associated with Restore Britain, and he basically says that Jews should be deported because they're foreign, and some very extreme views. Now, Rupert Lowe's been approached about this and say, you're going to admonish this guy, and his response is, we do not police our membership. Now, I'm not for a second suggesting that Rupert Lowe agrees with what Steve Laws said, or I'm not even suggesting that Steve Laws is central to the Restore Britain equation. But when Rupert Lowe says we do not police our membership, well, if you're a political party, you kind of have to. You can't let people freelance with these ludicrously extreme views that make you look bad. So I would suggest Mr. Lowe's got to get his act together here, hasn't he?
It's not just that it makes them look bad. I mean, and it's not just Steve Laws. I mean, there's a load of neo-Nazis, and there's not a huge neo-Nazi fraternity in the UK, but they exist, right? And there really are some nasty Jew-hating, foreigner-hating, hate the colour of people's skin types, right? They're a small minority, and it always is annoying that, the likes of Hope Not Hate will shout racist to anybody who's concerned about mass migration and put us all in the same category, right? But we should be able to call out people who have got vile, bigoted views, genuinely views which are intolerant to the extreme. And the problem is, if you just say, oh, I don't mind if they hang around Restore, then that is not a very good case for Restore. And if I can just say, I mean, I've just had a little tiny weeny bit of a spat. I'm looking at my phone now rather than I'm checking my social media. because I actually was taking up one of one of the core team around Rupert. He actually said that complaints about another anti-Semitic neo-Nazi type who had been has just been allowed to rejoin Restore. He sort of said, we at Restore Britain do not care for minoritarian moral fetishes. Anti-Semitism is not a minoritarian fetish, right?
Minoritarian, I like that word.
Well, of course, there's not very many Jews in the UK. So that apparently is some sort of like minority wing.
That is bad.
And it's vile, right? Because I can tell you,
I agree.
if you let anti-Semitism, right, rot at the heart of Britain, then Britain as a nation state is got no moral basis on which it can stand, right? This is not some identity politics whinge, which is what they're trying to imply. And so I do think that it's an unpleasant thing. And it's a shame, you know, I'm sure lots of very good people support Restore. They think they're a bit different. They prefer Lothar Farage or whatever. I mean, you know, I'm not really making a point on that front. I do, however, think that any party, freedom of association requires that you say, we will only let people in who agree with us.
And you do...
If a load of Islamists decided to join Restore, would they say, oh, well, we don't police our membership, by the way? If a load of trans rights activists decided to join Restore, would they say, oh, look, it doesn't matter. Let 1,000 flowers bloom.
A political party does have to police its membership. It's as simple as that. Claire, great to have you on the show, as always. Brilliant stuff from Baroness Claire Fox there. Now, I'm going to read you because we refer to the Makerfield by-election. We're not really allowed to talk about it very much in case we prejudice the outcome of that political battle, that electoral battle. But every time we do mention it, we have to read out the full list of candidates in that by-election. They are Jake Austin, Liberal Democrats, Count Binface Party, Andy Burnham, the Labour Party, Dan Clark, the Libertarian Party, John Dyer, Independent, Ed Gemmell, Climate Party, Paul Gould, Independent, Alan Howling Loud Hope, the official Monster Raving Loony Party, Robert Kenyon, Reform UK, Robert Pownall, Protect the Wild, Rebecca Shepherd, Restore Britain, Sarah Wakefield, Green Party, Peter Ward, Rejoin EU, and Michael Winstanley, the Conservative Party. There you are. Let's go to break.
If your other half came home with £125,000 worth of motorhome, wouldn't you go, darling, where did you get that from? Yeah. Have that turned up on the driveway? Where did you get the motorhome from? It's a very expensive motorhome. £81,000 Jaguar, Volkswagen Golf, partly funded with stolen cash, luxury watches over 9,000 quid, Mont Blanc pens, a £3,232 coffee machine. What was the man doing?
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Out, brothers, out. The doctors are going out on strike again. British Medical Association, the BMA, their two-bit left-wing union with the posh name, is calling for full pay restoration to 2008 levels, arguing that doctors' real terms earnings have fallen by over 20% due to years of below inflation increases. They're demanding a 35% pay rise, a figure the government says is unaffordable. Let's talk to former NHS Trust Chairman Martin Gower. This is their 16th industrial action, these doctors. Now, we've got to stress at the outset, Martin, we'll talk about the details in a minute, but every time doctors walk out, same as when nurses walk out, same as when ambulance drivers walk out, or 999 operators, patients are not affected, patients die. So this strike will cause the death of patients. You and I have talked about this before. I cannot believe that in this country we allow people to die on the altar of industrial action. If these doctors are going to carry on like this is their 16th action, I think we have to ban them from striking. People are dying because of this.
I mean, Kevin, I agree. The trouble is, in reality, the present government isn't going to do that.
I get that.
I mean, what we've got, is a big employer. I think it's the 5th largest employer in the world, lying somewhere between Walmart, the American supermarket group, and Amazon globally. 1.6 million employees. And what you get with big businesses are big unions, especially in Britain, and especially when you've got a socialist government. And it takes me back to things like the miners' strikes, and all of that stuff way back in the 1970s. And what I find extraordinary, when I first read this article in the Telegraph, and I'm an online subscriber to the Telegraph, is the absolute arrogance of this fellow, I think Dr. Jack Fletcher. Do you know who I am? Were you prepared to give Mr. Murray time to settle into his role before completing the work his predecessor left unfinished? And then he says, he had a genuine opportunity to break this logjam with fresh energy and ambition. I'm sorry, Sunshine, who do you think you're talking to?
Exactly. I mean,
unbelievable arrogance.
I should read out what the BMA are saying. This is their official statement. Following weeks of talks between the government and the BMA, the new Health Secretary James Murray has made clear he will not increase the investment in the offer already rejected by resident doctors. Without any meaningful change to the latest offer, the Resident Doctor Committee has been left with no choice but to call further strike action in England. The action will run from 7 a.m. on Monday, the 15th of June, to 6:59 a.m. on Friday, the 19th of June, with more strike dates in July to be announced in the event of no further progress. What this proves, if nothing else, Martin, is that when Wes Streeting first took over as Health Secretary, when the Labour government was voted in 22 months ago, and immediately caved in to all the demands by the doctors, we against all of our warnings, if you cave into them, if you give them what they want, they will come back for more. No, West decided if I give them a very generous deal, they won't come back. They'll be so thrilled. They've been coming back and back and back, and now this latest 35% demand. West Streeting made a massive error by capitulating to this lot, didn't he?
Well, Kevin, it's what blackmailers always do, isn't it? People who are being blackmailed think they've paid a few £1,000s to a blackmailer and they think it's all over, but of course it comes back to haunt them again and again and again. And that's what we've got. It is, there's no other word for it. It is blackmail. It is using the lives of patients as a weapon.
Yes.
To extract more money from us taxpayers. It shows what's wrong with the system. It shows what's wrong with the structure. I mean, nowhere else in the world would you find this nonsense going on? Firstly, because there is competition between providers. Doctors in most countries, in most developed countries, are either self-employed or they're employed by the local hospital, which may be a charitable organization or maybe part of a large corporation. They negotiate, if there's any union negotiation to go on, they do it with them. This idea of nationally negotiating for thousands and thousands of staff in the organization, there's always going to be a clutch of people in the BMA, or the National Union of Doctors, as I call it, the NUD, the people in NUD will always use their power, and I think they're in a minority. A lot of junior doctors don't go on strike, and quite a number, take annual leave.
Yeah.
They know this is coming along, so they take a week off, spend a week in Barbados and can't come home at the end of the week and go back to work.
I remember an earlier strike by these people, Martin, and one of these doctors came on. It was a youngish woman and said, we want to go back to 2008 in real terms. We need the money that we earned then. And it was pointed out to her, but in 2008 you were 5 years old. The entire basis of these disputes is dubious, to say the least, questionable. But as you say, these doctors, I don't know what has happened to doctors in this modern day and age, but doctors used to cherish life. They used to see their mission, their calling in life, to protect, to preserve life. Now they use human lives to negotiate pay deals for themselves. It's corrupt. It's corrupt.
Kevin, we have friends who are doctors. My own brother is a retired doctor, a hospital consultant in kidney diseases in London, and he cannot believe that doctors at any level would strike and put patients at risk. It goes against everything that they actually should be doing. And what worries me about this a lot is, once I was told that if the BMA got hold of you when you were still a student, you'd lost. Whereas if people understood and grew up a bit, this is like student protests. They look like student protests when stupid people are out picketing.
They look like students. You're right.
Waving.
Yeah, I'll tell you another thing. They used to get lots of beep, beep, beeps and good on you from the traffic going past. They don't get it anymore. They are not popularly supported. Martin, it is great to have you on. We'll talk again, I'm sure, about this upcoming dispute. But in the meantime, thank you very much for your valuable time. Martin Gower there, former National NHS Trust Chairman. Next up, we're going to talk to Samara Gill, our resident Australia, about what's going on down in Australia. It seems to be getting very lost to wokery. They've just brought in laws that will protect, to bring in pregnancy protection for men. I don't know if I can help the people of Australia, but men can't get pregnant. So they don't really need pregnancy protection, do they? We'll talk to Samara next about what the hell is going on down under. Stay where you are.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. We need to talk about Australia, which seems to be getting more and more lost in the wonderful, unwonderful world of wokery. They're bringing in laws to protect trans women from pregnancy discrimination. Now, trans women are biological males. Now, I don't know, as I say, if I could just help the Australians, I can inform them that males can't get pregnant. So quite what pregnancy discrimination against blokes means, I'm not too sure. Welcome to our resident Australian, our brilliant reporter, Samara Gill. Hi, Samara.
Hi, Kev. Great to be with you. You can get jailed for that in Australia
Down in Australia, I know. Yeah, it's a bloke in a dress. It's not a woman. Right. Well, we've got a little bit of footage, some film we can play of this extraordinary exchange surrounding this strange pregnancy protection law for men in dresses.
Trans women who applies for a job, for example,
yes,
and she may be asked whether or not she intends to have children, and if she replies, yes, I do, and then doesn't get the job because that employer doesn't want to employ women who may be of childbearing age, then she may have been subjected to unlawful discrimination on the basis of potential pregnancy.
I'm very confused. A biological male can't become pregnant.
But the grounds of pregnancy includes potential pregnancy as well as pregnancy.
But if they can't become pregnant, how can you then become potentially pregnant?
Someone who is a trans woman may be assumed to be pregnant or to be able to be pregnant.
Biological men, doesn't matter what way you cut it, you cannot get pregnant.
Well, you'll be surprised to hear I'm with the lady in the white jacket there, a little bit of a ray of sunshine, common sense there, pointing out to that lunatic woman going on about blokes getting pregnant. Men can't get pregnant. What on earth is going on in your fabulous home country, Samara?
Yeah, Kev, that doesn't look like the Senate. That looks like some exchange going on inside a mental institution or something where, you know, people are being gaslit to the highest order. I mean, it's just insane that governmental time is being wasted on this claptrap. I think it's interesting, though, in terms of how far down the river of woke we've gone in Australia. You know, they're talking about perceived discrimination, and another case that is really big out here is the Sal Grover case, whereby basically Sal Grover wanted to, and it's all off the back of this, that's what all that conversation is happening. She wanted to create basically a female-only app called Giggle. And
that's sexist. That's implying that women just giggle.
Well, precisely, but at least she's a woman, and actually she's become almost like the staunch feminist and someone that is actually a real fighter for women's rights, because essentially, you know, she's an actor, and this was created out of her getting abused by men in Hollywood.
Hang on, I think we've lost the sound there. Is there a problem there? She was in full throw there. I mean, to go, we'll get Samara back. We'll get the sound back. Let me know when it's ready, folks. But what that lady in the white jacket was saying, well, we've got Samara back. I'll bring this up in a minute. Hi, Samara. Sorry, we lost your sound then. You were saying...
Apologies.
Well, you were saying what that lady in the white jacket was saying, that the woke woman... the lady in the white jacket saying, I don't really get this, I'm confused.
Yeah.
You want pregnancy protection for biological males. They can't get pregnant. And then the woke woman just starts waffling on about the potential to get pregnant. Women in white jacket, well, there's no potential for males to get pregnant. I mean, what planet does the woke woman think she's inhabiting? Absolute insanity. She's just spewing total gobbledygook.
It's totally bizarre, and unfortunately she seems like she's actually on planet Australia or whatever that because that's what it's become. It's become very, very woke. It was interesting. I was going through a bunch of articles in preparation for this, and I found a quote from Paula Gerber, who's she's a professor at one of the top law schools in Australia, and she wrote an article for the ABC, which is our equivalent of the BBC, but it's much more woke. And she said Australia should be proud of the fact that, unlike the UK, we have contemporary anti-discrimination laws that protect all women, and courts that are willing to interpret and apply the laws in ways which are more consistent with human rights norms and modern science. And what she meant by that is that trans women should not be discriminated against. And she actually said that in this recent case where this poor woman is just trying to have a women's only app, was then forced to let this man in.
Oh yeah, I remember this.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars. Yeah, exactly. She said that rigid gender norms harm everyone. If trans women like Roxanne Tickle can lawfully be excluded from a site because they don't appear feminine enough, it's not difficult to imagine a time where there may be many attempts to exclude lesbians who challenge the boundaries of femininity by rejecting feminine clothes, appearances, and mannerisms. So essentially, and it's a very deep, and we could get into this topic all day, but what this very heralded law professor is saying, that a woman is basically how you dress. It's nothing about your, genitalia. It's nothing about your actual gender. It's just about the way that you present yourself, and it's so dangerous, Kev.
Yeah, I think you're right. I can put names to the faces now. This was a Senate hearing, as you said, Samara, and the lady in the white jacket, the one in possession of common sense, she's Senator Michaela Cash. And she was questioning the mad Human Rights Commissioner, Anna Cody, there. And she said, Michaela, the senator, said she was very confused because biological males could not become pregnant. And then she said, if they can't become pregnant, how can they become potentially pregnant? If a bloke came in and they said, are you going to have children, which is the same question, really, and he said, oh, yeah, maybe. Are you saying that he could claim that ground? So that's what this human rights lady, Anna Cody, was saying. She sort of basically says, I agree that men can't get pregnant, but we need to give them pregnancy protection in case they potentially get pregnant. This is cuckoo stuff. This is mad.
Well, it's actually insane. So in Australia now, apparently looking like a man is a protected characteristic. So and it's been used now in cases, and that's kind of why they're having this explosive argument and clash in the Senate, because it's really, really concerning. Again, referring back to the case, the guy who was wearing a V-neck T-shirt and appearing masculine was then becoming, basically she's being discriminated against because she looks like, he looks like a male. It's really difficult to keep gendering and misgendering, and it's just the most complex argument that really should end in a man is a man and a woman is a woman. And unfortunately, the West is being so tied up in all this divisive rhetoric that we're actually losing our way on so many other issues. What really underpins this and annoys me is that the amount of time that is being used to debate
in the Senate,
many other things.
Yeah, this is Ms. Cody, the human rights lady, just to reiterate or repeat her confusing argument. She argued that a trans woman, that's a bloke, in other words, a biological male, could be assumed to be pregnant. No, they couldn't. They can't get pregnant. So she said a trans woman could be assumed to be pregnant or able to get pregnant. No, she's not able to get pregnant. And then she goes on to say that would constitute discrimination if they missed out on a job. So you're talking about a biological male, a bloke in a dress, goes for a job, pretends that he or says he wants to get pregnant even though he can't, and then somebody doesn't give him a job because he said he wants to get pregnant. even though he can't get pregnant. Australia needs saving from this deranged lunacy, doesn't it? I mean, how did Australia arrive at this point? What happened to Australia? Used to be a very down-to-earth kind of no-nonsense place. Why is it lost in this absolutely crazy wokery now?
It's a great question, Kev. I think we became totally ideologically captured. Unfortunately, most people moved to the cities, became some form of liberal elite, more concerned about their matchas and their lattes and their, you know, high-paid, cushy jobs, and are really out of touch. And I also think that people have become so indoctrinated online. You know, even when I go back to Australia, I feel like I'm talking to people who are 10 years behind the zeitgeist, which is over here, where we've got great people like J.K. Rowling, Sharon Davies, who pushed for that Supreme Court ruling. And we don't even have one of those over in Australia. So women are not protected as it stands. And that's the issue there. I think we're a long, long way back. And unfortunately, poor people like Senator Cash and also Sal Grover are getting absolutely vilified in the Australian public and sort of seen as the devil incarnate. Hopefully that changes like it has in the UK.
Well, it's good to have you on the show, Samara, and I think we'll get Senator Michaelia Cash on as well, a beacon of common sense in your country as it goes insane. It's bad enough here. It's bad enough here, but down where you're from, oh my God, what the hell is going on? Samara, great stuff as always. Thanks for coming on. Samara Gill, Talks reporter, our resident Australian. I still couldn't quite get my head around it. So I can sue for discrimination because I didn't get a job on the assumption that I didn't get that job because they didn't give me that job because they know I want to get pregnant. So I can then sue for discrimination, even though I can't get pregnant and they know I can't get pregnant because I'm a male. I don't see. Stop the world. I want to get off. Stop this madness. Honestly. Next up, we'll talk about Sun's sport, or we'll talk about sport with the Sun's director of sport, Sean Custis. That next. Stay tuned.
If your other half came home with £125,000 worth of motorhome, wouldn't you go, darling, where did you get that from? Yeah. Have that turned up on the driveway? Where did you get the motorhome from? It's a very expensive motorhome. £81,000 Jaguar, Volkswagen Golf, partly funded with stolen cash, luxury watches over 9,000 quid, Mont Blanc pens, a £3,232 coffee machine. What was the man doing?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Sean Custis is in the studio, fresh from, what was it last night? The
League Managers Association.
The League Manager. He vaguely remembers the event.
Yes.
Suffering but recovering.
Weirdly, Mikel Arteta didn't win the main award. He did not win Manager of the Year. He won Premier League Manager of the Year, but Frank Lampard actually won the big trophy, Manager of the Year. It's quite unusual for him to go into the Championship to give the Manager of the Year award.
Was Arteta fed up about that?
I think to be honest, I think he'd already left. Maybe he knew something, I don't know, but he was there for a good, reasonable amount of time because he got Premier League Manager of the Year. But no, it was a good evening.
It was a good evening. What you can remember of it. Right, let's go through some of the stories. Transfer news, obvs, at this point in the season. Well, the season's over really. Barcelona bid £70 million for Newcastle's excellent Anthony Gordon.
Well, excellent. It's interesting you say that because he's divided opinion with Newcastle fans this season, particularly second half of the season.
Because he just didn't care.
I tried to avoid mentioning Fulham, but you'll notice he just sat on the bench at the weekend. He didn't get on. Look, this has been in the wind anyway. They had people had met with Barcelona previously. It's clearly cranked up. He hasn't had a good second half to the season. To be honest, not brilliant really earlier either. There's always been a feeling he wanted to get away ever since Liverpool flirted with signing him. It's felt like he wants to leave.
Yeah, he's been in that situation because Eddie Howe got very fed up with him, didn't he?
Yeah.
I hate it when players, they want to leave and they just stop putting any effort in.
Well, yeah, he wasn't in the best of form, let's put it that way. But of course, Barcelona, 70 million, you think, well, I haven't seen £70 million worth of football in this season.
That.
But
yes, a lot
Barcelona, and if he goes there, what does that mean for Marcus Rashford? The claim is that they want to sign both of them, but they don't really want to pay money for Rashford. They want another loan for another year. But Rashford plays on the left. Gordon plays on the left. That's how it is. So what would it mean for Rashford? He's not always held down a place in the Barca team anyway. And what's the dynamic going to be like when they go to the World Cup? Because Rashford is the preferred player over Gordon for England, but at Barcelona, Gordon would be the preferred player over Rashford.
I suppose they'll be sharing any drinks together.
It's a curious situation, that one. And also, Newcastle want to get the deal done early before the World Cup. Gordon wants it done early. Barcelona would like it done early. I think the stars might align. Bayern Munich still interested in him as well.
Interesting. Right, Fernandes wants to leave Chelsea.
He does, yeah. This has not come as a mega shock, I don't think, because he's been kicking off a little bit. He made those comments earlier in the season, flirting.
Chelsea want 120 million, seems like a lot.
it does, but he was 106, 107 million when he signed. Now, you wouldn't necessarily argue that he got better, but he is a World Cup winner. He'll be going to the World Cup again, and look, if he'd cost 50 million, you'd say what a signing he's been for Chelsea. But 106, has he justified that? I'm not sure. But they're still looking to make a profit out of him. I think they'll do well to get 120. There is a feeling he could be going to Man City.
Yeah, okay.
Which is, like they can spend yet more money and get... Look, he is a good player. There's no doubt. He's improved his goal scoring. But it's just not really... You wouldn't say he's a roaring success at Chelsea.
No, you certainly wouldn't. We'll watch that one with interest. Ederson, Man United are in advanced talks to make Atalanta Brazil midfielder Ederson their first summer signing.
Yeah, I mean, people won't be particularly familiar with this Brazilian player, and also it's one of those middle-ranking signings. When you sign somebody for 40 million, everybody goes, "Oh well, you can gamble on that. It's not very expensive." I mean, £40 million really is a lot of money, but in football terms nowadays, it isn't. Plus, he's not even going to the World Cup. He's not in the Brazilian World Cup squad. No, and Man United have gone all out for him to get. They want this deal sorted out, and of course, Casemiro's left, so they want a player of
they need a midfielder,
But it was surprising to see that he wasn't in the Brazil squad as well. So you think, is he really all that?
When's the actual World Cup actually kick off? When does it start?
June the 11th.
June the 11th. You going over?
I will be. I'll be going on June the 7th, Kevin.
Can I have your job? This is a great story, or an unexpected story, that Nuno is expected to stay as head coach at West Ham.
Yeah. Look, they had 2 days of talks. all the mood music and indeed the hints from inside the club, coming from people within inside the club, was that he was leaving. I think most fans expected him to leave and didn't seem overfussed whether he stayed or whether he went. There wasn't an absolute campaign for him to leave, but I don't think they were going to be bothered one way or the other. Now, he does have a good track record on the Championship, having brought Wolves out of it with record points in the past, really made his name by doing that. So there has been long discussions, who wants what, can he deliver it, what he did at Wolves, and it seems he persuaded them that he's up for the challenge to get them back out of the Championship, and West Ham have decided, OK, then we'll go with it. But they certainly were of a mood for him to go after West Ham were relegated, but everybody's had 2 days to think about it, or 3 days to think about it, and now here we are.
And who else is fixing to leave West Ham? Well, nearly everyone, isn't it?
I mean, you would think, even though Bowen was talking about right now, our job is to get us back out of the Championship, you would think Jared Bowen would be leaving. He's a good player. He's obviously not in the World Cup squad, but I think he's a proven player. He's a better player in a better side. And he's fairly industrious, so he'd be a good signing for quite a lot of teams, not least mine, I would think.
But I
think yours would be a bit below him, but I think my team might not be. I think he'd be...
What's the point of going from West Ham to Fulham?
Fernandez,
we're in the Premier League, that's why. But he did say that he wanted to stay. I mean, he's going to be there.
He did, because Danny Dyer's probably got his thumb screws on him, saying he wants him to stay. But look, I think West Ham fans would be delighted if he did stay, but because he's proven in lower leagues, he came from non-league. You know, he's a proper battler, one of their own. Yeah, he's a proper battler, and he'd be good for them in the Championship. But I think for his own career, it'd be better to sign for a Premier League club.
But West Ham, I was reading, planning or in the midst of some kind of fire sale of all sorts of players.
Yeah, there could be, as you say, you know, the whole squad is probably up for sale to a certain extent, because they need to bring money in. Their costs are going to be... There's going to be a lot of costs. A lot of sponsors, for instance, have deals whereby if you're relegated, then they don't have to pay as much in sponsorship. Season tickets will be slow to renew. Of course, you're going to lose a lot of money, and you need to bring money in from player sales. So I would guess that, any player for the right price is going to be on the way.
And so just go back to the World Cup. What were England's first games?
They play on 17th, 23rd and 27th from memory, and we're in Dallas, Boston and New Jersey.
You're going to be
No, I'm based in New York.
And so will you go to the New Jersey game?
No, I'll have to work that night in the office, because we're producing shows, as I think I've told you before, from the studio. And they're busy nights when you're running the show.
So you'll be filing for the paper and producing
TV stuff and online, etc.
Yeah, and there's me being all jealous of you. It'd be one of those things where you're at the big event, but you never get to see it.
I get to see a couple of games, but they probably won't be England ones for what I've got to do. I used to do that. Look, I've seen enough England heartache on the road report on the various World Cups.
When you get there, Sean, avoid England matches at all costs. That's my advice. It's great stuff from Sean Custis, Director of Sport at The Sun, all in the back pages of your favourite newspaper tomorrow. And next up, we're going to talk to Mark Nittlewood about all the big stories of the day, so stay tuned.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. In about 20 minutes or so, we're going to have another look at the situation involving Nicola Sturgeon. She says she knew nothing of the £120,000 motorhome her husband, Peter Morrell, the chief executive of the SNP, purchased with SNP funds, embezzled funds. She said she knew nothing about that vehicle. Well, a witness has come forward to say that she saw that they saw Nicola Sturgeon with that vehicle. So it gets murkier and murkier. We'll revisit the Sturgeon soap opera in just a little while. But first, let's go through some of the big stories of the day with the Director of Popular Conservatism, Mark Littlewood. Hello, Mark.
Hi, Kev. Great to be with you.
Good to have you on the show. Well, the big political story of the day, let's get your take on it. Tony Blair's extraordinary intervention, a 5,600-word essay, basically opening fire on Keir Starmer, all guns blazing, essentially saying, you know, basically Keir Starmer and his government have screwed everything up on every single front, calling for an abandonment of the madness of net zero, calling for the boats to be stopped, whatever it takes, and condemning the ongoing lurch to the left, a lurch that will get worse when Andy Burnham comes in. Andy Burnham has fired back at Tony Blair today, saying he doesn't know what's going on. I suspect he does know what's going on. As I pointed out earlier, you won't hear me say this very often, but I agree with Tony Blair. Do you, Mark?
Yeah, pretty much, Kev. I've read the essay and I agreed with much of it. I mean, it was a bit too right-wing, even for my tastes, actually, in some elements. But there you go. It looks like Blair has basically written either the Conservative Party or the Reform UK manifesto for the next election. It's extraordinary. And he calls this the radical centre, but it's not. It's definitely a right-of-centre analysis of the failings of the Labour government. And basically, he's bang on right. I think the only major issue that I disagree with him on is digital ID, which I think is a terrible idea. I think gives the state way too much power.
Agreed.
But elsewhere, bang on the money. That it's all got to start with growth. I mean, Tony Blair here is channeling his inner Liz Truss, it seems, that, you know, growth is the necessity in the economy, that you're dealing with a smaller and smaller pie and how you carve it up if you haven't got growth. So you can't just keep hiking up taxes. You can't just keep piling red tape onto businesses. He's right across the board. I mean, interestingly, one point that you didn't mention, Kev, which now looks like it could be on the verge of triggering a civil war within the Labour Party. Blair is very clear that we shouldn't go back into the European Union, that would be a very bad misstep to take, especially as Britain's in such a weak position at the moment. So, yeah, he really has opened with gunfire. I mean, previously when he's popped up, he's typically criticised one particular policy of the government. But this is an all-out assault on the government's entire strategy. And it seems to me an all-out assault on whoever the next Prime Minister might be strategy as well. It's kind of refreshing. It's good stuff. But I think the chance that the Labour government will take heed of it is virtually zero, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I mean, he makes some sensible suggestions, such as if you ditch the net zero insanity of that lunatic Ed Miliband and started exploiting North Sea gas and oil, and maybe he didn't mention this, but I will, maybe even frack as well, energy prices would plummet, and that will be electorally very advantageous for Labour, but they won't ditch it, obviously. They'll carry on down this mad path. But reading between the lines of this long essay, Mark, the way I see it is, yes, he's really attacked Starmer to an extraordinary extent, saying this man had no plan, there's no direction, everything he does is incoherent, hard to work out what the hell he believes in, and so on and so forth. So it absolutely eviscerates Keir Starmer, but then says to Labour, in essence, do not delude yourself, though, that just changing leaders will sort your problems out. And thereby, he sort of directs his guns, turns his guns on Andy Burnham, because he says that a further lurch to the left will be utterly disastrous and result in certain annihilation at the general election for the Labour Party. So he's attacking Starmer for being useless, clearly doesn't want him to be there anymore, but he doesn't want Andy Burnham either.
Yeah. Well, maybe Blair should throw his own hat in the ring.
Yeah, it's only a matter of time, Mark.
we could do worse than that. I mean, the other thing which he's strong on, and I agree with his analysis here, is he says that, you know, in politics, you need an analysis and a vision. You really need to be able to tell the story of what you're trying to do. Now, Blair's language when he was in office, I think, was a bit flowery, to be honest. He sort of talked about the stakeholder society, and conferences and seminars were put on to try and understand what on earth was meant by the stakeholder society. So his own vision wasn't perhaps crystal clear, but he had, if you like, some sort of coherent methodology. He wanted the private sector, the market side of the economy, to flourish. He didn't want to fleece that dry. He didn't want to burden it with too much red tape. He didn't want taxes on business to be ludicrous, because he realised that was the way that he could pay for the various public service projects. Now, his suggestion is really, I'm slightly putting words into Blair's mouth, but that this government came into office with not really the first clue of what to do, that they had just got used to repeating, we are not the Tories, put us in charge, we need change. But the only change they were talking about wasn't even rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. It was just changing who was sitting in the deck chairs in the Titanic. That they just, you know, if we just sit in these deck chairs, things will be enormously better. There's no coherent vision, and I find this with Burnham as well. That you know, I kind of listen to him, and I understand each individual word, and each word, the words do make up individual sentences and paragraphs. But if you're actually trying to get to the bottom of what he thinks needs to be done, it's viciously difficult to achieve that. So they're not really narrating any kind of strategy for the UK. So therefore, you quite quickly just sort of, if you like, stumble from one accident to the next, or rely on one prejudice or the next. And that's really just, I think, does adequately explain the desperate plight that the government's in, and the desperate plight that the country's in as a consequence of its complete lack of coherent vision, its permanent dithering, and it having no kind of compass or lodestar about the direction it wants to go.
Absolutely. And Andy Burnham has responded to Tony Blair's criticism, which is obviously levelled at him, because what Tony Blair said is this continuing lurch to the left, which will clearly get worse when Burnham if Burnham becomes Prime Minister. He said that is reducing Britain to the relegation zone, the international relegation zone. In other words, we are declining as a nation due to this left-wing comfort zone that this mad government wants to dwell in the face of the realities of our economic decline. Now, here's what Andy Burnham has said initially. You'll be excited to know he's going to give a full and considered response tomorrow.
I can barely wait.
I know. I'm not going to be able to sleep tonight. I really aren't. But this is what he said so far. He's talked to the Observer newspaper. This is Andy Burnham talking about Tony Blair. He doesn't mention inequality once. If you don't get how that's driving politics now, if you are not rooting your analysis in the fact that people are unable to live and that things that were taken for granted are no longer affordable, then you are not understanding what's going on. Do you know what I find so worrying and dreary about that statement? You know, everybody wants equality. Nobody likes inequality. But when Labour politicians like, he didn't mention inequality, you know you're just going to get some useless lefty ideologue pursuing dead old ideas and ruining the country. That's what worries me about this. He didn't mention inequality. Come on.
Yeah. No, I agree with you there, Kev. And I think Burnham also sort of, if you like, sells the past there, because I don't think the issue is inequality, right? It's not a problem that there are too many billionaires in the world. The problem is, and Burnham refers to this, that things are not materially improving for those in the middle or towards the lower rungs of the income ladder. Generally speaking, if people, even if they're towards the lower end of the income spectrum, can see that their pay is typically going up every year, that it's easier to afford things every year, that they can look forward to the next 5 years and think at the end of it, I'm likely to be quite a lot richer in half a decade's time, in 10 years' time, things are moving in the right direction, then I think they're content. They don't get miserable just because Elon Musk is very rich. They're miserable because their own situation has not improved. And why is that? Well, we've completely failed on housing, so housing is ludicrously expensive. One of the biggest cost of living things, we keep hearing about the cost of living crisis, but for many households, the biggest cost of living item is your tax bill, and that has gone up. So if you're spending more and more on rent and more on tax, there's less for the everyday things in life, even things like food and energy. So the mission has got to be to have mass prosperity, to ensure that people, wherever they are on the income ladder, have the opportunity to get richer. It's not about the gap. It's that the escalator has just stopped moving. So the people on the bottom end of the escalator just don't feel they're moving upwards, and they're not moving upwards. That's the bit that's got to be solved, not yet another welfare redistribution programme, which seems to be the way that Andy Burnham would be tilting. We have tried that strategy to death, and it has been a colossal failure, basically.
Well, Tony Blair got rather upset because Andy Burnham suggested that 40 years of neoliberalism has plunged this country into a nightmare of inequality. It's all such tired old claptrap. But Burnham responded, Tony Blair criticises my phrase about 40 years of neoliberalism, but the last 40 years has given us wide inequality. That's what's responsible for the abandonment of the centre. This is ideological claptrap, and it's really worrying that if this guy is going to be our next Prime Minister, this is the nebulous path he's going to tread. I'm going to get rid of inequality. Yeah. We need practical realities, not that kind of student activist nonsense.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, Kev. And it also shows a rather feeble grasp of what actually happened over the last 4 decades. Because if you were to go back to the Thatcher era or the early years of Tony Blair, well, yeah, OK, we did have, compared to today, a rather lower tax economy. Government finances were under some sort of control. But over the past 25 or 30 years, Andy Burnham says 40, but over 3/4 of that period, the last 30 years of it, we haven't had what Burnham calls neoliberalism, which means slashing taxes, rolling back the state, getting rid of red tape. We have had the opposite of that. Taxes have gone up, the state has got bigger. The amount of money the government's spending has got completely out of control. It hasn't just gone up. We're borrowing it from our kids and our grandkids to spend it on ourselves today. So if you were thinking that things have gone wrong over the last 25 or 30 years, and I think they have, it's not because of some Wild West free market capitalism. It's quite the opposite. We've been spending money like there's no tomorrow. We've been passing more and more petty laws and placing more and more expensive burdens on ordinary men and women and businesses up and down the land. And we are borrowing and spending money like a drunken sailor. That's what's gone wrong. I can't believe that Andy Burnham considers that to be neoliberalism. That's the sort of democratic socialism that Burnham practices and preaches, and it's that that's led us to this sorry path in 2026. A dose of neoliberalism would be more than welcome, frankly. It might be the way to get out of this mess.
I fear, due to his left-wing ideological standpoint, worldview, that Andy Burnham will do nothing to stop the insanity of Ed Miliband's crazy net zero policies. But we've learnt today that energy bills are due to a 13% rise in the price cap. Government, of course, saying nothing to do with us, it's the Iran war. But contrary to the Energy Secretary's promise that his policies would bring our energy prices plummeting, bring them down nicely, they've been rocketing steadily ever since he started to impose his deranged ideas upon an unsuspecting nation. Come January, the cap will rise by 13%, meaning that our bills are going to go up by 220 quid a year. This is the latest pretty substantial rise that we've suffered thanks to Ed Miliband. How much longer are we supposed to put up with this? How about exploit the North Sea oil and gas reserves, start fracking and bring our energy prices down? I think that's what Blair's getting at. He said if you give people cheap energy prices, they'll vote for you. If you give them ever rising, rocketing energy bills, they won't vote for you. Blair's got a point, hasn't he?
Oh, absolutely. And how much longer are we going to put up with it, you asked, Kev? Well, I mean, I'm afraid this is going to get worse and worse unless there is a dramatic change of strategy. You can have carbon net zero, or you can have cheap and abundant energy. You can't have both. It's a trade-off. And Ed Miliband has persuaded himself and is failing to persuade the public that you can have both, that somehow going down this green route is not just good for the environment, but good for our back pockets. That's emphatically not the case. So we've got to make a decision. How much do we care about reducing Britain's carbon net zero footprint to zero by 2050, which would make the most microscopic difference to overall global emissions, might knock 1% off the overall total at best? Or how much do we care that at the moment, more people die of hypothermia, many, many more die of hypothermia than of climate change in the UK. So we actually need cheap energy, not just to get people's bills down, but for health reasons, right? It's we can be, I know it's blazing hot at the moment, but in the depths of winter, we really do want cheap and abundant energy. So it's a nonsense, the path we've gone down. And if Ed Miliband really has persuaded himself that there's no trade-off here, we can have carbon net zero and all things will be well, completely wrong. Look, international shocks do affect the energy price. That's true. The government can't necessarily deal with every single shock to oil prices across the globe, but it can set a framework that means that we can deal with those shocks better. But instead, it's done the opposite. Ultimately, we've got to get rid of this energy price cap, right? We need an open and free market in providing energy, but that means one where we are genuinely going to exploit the energy resources which are abundant in the UK and which, for ludicrous leftist carbon net zero reasons, we seemed utterly determined not to take advantage of. That's the craziness. So it needs literally a 180-degree pivot here in order to get our energy policy back on track, and we need to get the government out of the energy market as far as we can. We don't want energy companies massively profiteering, but energy companies' profits are smaller than government levies on energy bills. The government are the profiteer from the energy industry at the moment. So we've got to make it easier to invest, easier to get our natural resources out of the ground, out of the sea, and before long we can crack this problem. But as you imply, Kev, I think, unfortunately, Ed Miliband and the Labour government are too far down this path and show not the first sign of turning back.
Yeah, Burnham will just take us further down that path, there's no doubt about that. Every policy you detest, every policy that costs us a lot of money, Burnham will double down on. A quick word for you before you go, Mark. Always good to have you on the show. Thank you. About the migrant crisis, more than 1,000 have turned up here since from the north coast of France since last Friday. We're expecting more and more and more. Tony Blair said in order for the Labour Party to stand any chance of winning the next general election, and I'm going to quote him, he said they must stop the boats, whatever it takes. Again, I don't think Andy Burnham will do anything about this because I think he believes in open borders, all that left-wing claptrap. But when Tony Blair says whatever it takes, I think he's right. If you don't solve the migrant crisis, if it keeps on getting worse as it looks like it's going to, you don't get re-elected. But when he says whatever it takes, what do you think he means?
If your other half came home with £125,000 worth of motorhome, wouldn't you go, darling, where did you get that from? Yeah. Have that turned up on the driveway? Where did you get the motorhome from? It's a very expensive motorhome. £81,000 Jaguar, Volkswagen Golf, partly funded with stolen cash, luxury watches over 9,000 quid, Mont Blanc pens, a £3,232 coffee machine. What was the man doing?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. We lost Mark Littlewood just before the break there. I was just about to ask him another question and he just sort of disappeared. So these things happen technologically, don't they? But let me ask you the question that I was about to ask Mark. Tony Blair says that whoever is the Prime Minister, currently Keir Starmer, possibly Andy Burnham before too long, that in order to win the next election, Labour must stop the boats, whatever it takes. What do you think he means by that? And in terms of whatever it takes, what would you do to stop the boats, to solve this crisis? 0344 499 1000. Also get on the phone about the other issues we're talking about. Do you agree with Tony Blair's attack on Keir Starmer? Do you agree that we've had 22 months of directionless chaos with no coherence whatsoever? Do you agree that we should abandon net zero for cheaper, decent energy prices? And do you agree with Tony Blair when he says we must not get closer to Europe? We must not rejoin. I mean, I must say I agree with him on all fronts. But mainly, I'd like to hear what you think he means by stopping the boats, whatever it takes. What would you do? How far would you go to stop the boats? 0344 499 1000. Now, shall we do a competition? Yes, let's. The FIFA World Cup 2026 is almost here, and thanks to Adidas, the tournament's official match ball supplier, our friends at TalkSport are giving you the chance to be there. Adidas is sending you and a friend to Dallas to see England versus Croatia live on June the 17th with return flights, accommodation, spending money, tickets, and your very own Adidas official match ball Trionder. Be at England's first game in the FIFA World Cup at one of the world's best stadiums. Ready to get that winning feeling? Here's how to enter.
Get ready for that winning feeling. For your chance to win, head to talksportwin.com or text TALK to 83338. Texts and online entries cost £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or call 0343 418 7260. Lines close 1st of June 2026 at 4 p.m. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. 18 plus UK residents only. This is a network promotion. See full terms and conditions at talksport.com/win. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now. Full T's and C's at win.talk.tv.
Welcome back. Let's go straight over to my next guest. We're going to talk about Nicola Sturgeon. Nicola Sturgeon doing her Manuel act about her husband Peter Murrell embezzling £400,000 worth of SNP funds and going on a bizarre spending spree, buying all this stuff, ludicrous list of ludicrous items, including 4 coffee machines, totaling about like 8,000 quid. Old Nicola did her Manuel act. I know nothing. I don't know. She says she doesn't know anything about it, and she particularly doesn't know about, or she insists she didn't know about Peter Murrell's £120,000 motorhome, the biggest item that he bought. Well, a witness has cast doubt on that. We'll talk about that with the Conservative MSP for Mid Scotland and Fife, Murdo Fraser. Welcome, Murdo.
Hi, Kevin. Thanks for having me on.
Well, first up, let me ask you this. This is where I see the essence of Nicola Sturgeon's problem. I think she was in charge. She had total power in Scotland for way too long. She was the mistress and the lord and lady of everything she was. Everybody did everything she said. They said yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full sir. She was the Queen of Scotland. So she now feels that if she says something to us, it is our duty to believe her. She's Nicola Sturgeon. We must believe her. Well, here's her problem. When she says she knew nothing of her husband, the chief executive of the SNP, Peter Murrell's bizarre spending spree, bringing into the family home and the marital home just thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds worth of nonsensical products like a model helicopter and a £943 oak ladder to a library that they didn't have. When she says she didn't know anything about that, insists that she knew nothing, this is her problem, Murdo. No one believes her. I don't believe her. Do you believe her?
Well, she must be the most uncurious spouse in history. If suddenly my house appeared full of all these very expensive items, Mont Blanc pens, Lalique salt and pepper sets, 4 coffee machines, an F-Pace Jaguar appeared in the drive, I'd be asking my wife where the money came from. And, well, maybe they had a very different relationship to most couples, but I think that would be a serious question. And the most bizarre aspect of this is, as you mentioned, Kevin, the camper van issue. Because Nicola Sturgeon says the first she became aware of the camper van was when the police told her about it. But there are 2 things that contradict that story. The first is that the camper van appears in the accounts of the SNP that Nicola Sturgeon herself is a signatory to. So perhaps she didn't read the accounts before signing them, which is, I suppose, possible. But for someone who's supposedly the master of detail, that seems unlikely. And the second problem is that an eyewitness has come forth to say that she was spotted in Asda in Dunfermline, which is where her mother-in-law lived and where the camper van was parked up, buying some shopping to take to a relative, presumably, therefore to her mother-in-law. So did she go to mother-in-law's house and not think to ask why there was a brand new camper van sitting in the front drive and where that had come from, who had paid for it? It just doesn't add up.
Yeah, this is a guy called Ryan Thomas Quinn who has spoken to the Telegraph newspaper today saying, I just find it unbelievable that clearly she was at her mother-in-law's house and she didn't think to ask her the question, where did that camper van on the driveway come from? I mean, if I've got the narrative of Nicola Sturgeon's story right, Nicola Sturgeon seems to claim she never even saw this camper van. Well, this guy, among quite a few people, Ryan Thomas Quinn, saying, well, she did see it. She did see it. And to be honest with you, Murdo, you know, if my wife suddenly turned up, this is the sort of thing she would do, actually, with 2 salt and pepper grinders that cost nearly £3,000, you know, A, I'd be furious, and B, I'd be curious. Not necessarily in that order, but, you know, the idea that he goes out and spends £3,000 on salt and pepper pots and Nicola didn't even notice, along with so many other bizarre luxury products. I mean, her story just doesn't stack up. And frankly, she's got a damn cheek to expect us to even pay any lip service at all. It's nonsense what she's saying.
Well, I think that's right. And I think in the court of public opinion, people will be drawing that conclusion. They'll be saying this is just not a credible story. But I suppose the reason why Nicola Sturgeon has to spin this line is the only alternative story is that she was aware of this and therefore was complicit in this crime.
Yes. That
her husband had committed. And you know what we now know is that the police produced a file of evidence that was given to the Crown Office in Scotland, who are the equivalent here of the Director of Public Prosecutions. And the police sought a direction. And what that means is the police here don't charge in serious criminal cases. They pass that to the prosecution service. And the prosecution service then take the decision as to how to proceed with the case. And they took the decision, the Crown Office, the Lord Advocate, who's head of the Crown Office, took the decision as to who to prosecute. So we know that evidence was compiled, which involved Nicola Sturgeon, because we know that she was interviewed. What we don't know is the extent of that evidence. And why was that decision taken not to prosecute her, but to prosecute Peter Murrell? And the question we've been asking as Scottish Conservatives at Holyrood today is, will the Lord Advocate please tell us why that choice was made? Was it a political choice that was made? What were the reasons behind it? Why did it decide just to go after Peter Murrell and not also after Nicola Sturgeon?
Yeah, I think that is the big question. And it may have been convenient for Police Scotland to do this. I don't know. But what we do know, contrary to what Miss Sturgeon was telling us, right up until a couple of days ago, I cooperated fully with the police investigation. I couldn't have been more helpful. Well, we all remember a couple of weeks after Murrell was first arrested that she was called in and she spent 10 hours being interrogated by Scottish police, and we only found out a couple of days ago that contrary to her contention that she was the model of cooperation, she spent 10 hours answering every single police question with no comment. Now, I'm not making this up. John Swinney, the leader of the SNP, was surrounded by reporters yesterday and said, what about this, John? It turns out she didn't really cooperate. What is your response to the fact that Nicola Sturgeon spent 10 hours saying to the police, no comment? There was no irony in John Swinney's voice when he literally replied, no comment. The SNP, I think, is in denial about the depth, the magnitude of this cataclysm that has befallen them. John Swinney, a couple of days ago, I'm not apologising, it's Peter Murrell, it wasn't me, it's like, hang on a second. I think you owe loads of thousands, maybe tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of decent, honest Scottish people who probably believe in independence, donated their hard-earned money to your party, and Peter Murrell went out and spent it on himself, and you're being begrudging about this. Don't blame me, it was Murrell's thought. Swinney, while he's not no commenting about Nicola Sturgeon's no comments, he owes the supporters, the donators to the SNP, a massive apology, doesn't he?
Well, he does, and there have been calls for a proper inquiry into this from people on the SNP. So we've had Joanna Cherry, the former SNP MP and KC. We've had today Alex Neil, who's a former cabinet minister in the Scottish Government, former SNP leadership contender, also calling for an independent inquiry to look at this. Because how can you, if you were a supporter of independence, how can you possibly be asked again by the SNP to donate money to a political campaign, knowing this has happened and knowing that they can't be trusted? And the other thing, Kevin, is just yesterday we had John Swinney trying to relaunch the SNP's independence campaign, trying to argue that the result of the election 3 weeks ago gives the SNP a mandate for another referendum. And that whole event was completely overshadowed by this scandal. And nobody is going to take the SNP seriously as a political force unless they can draw a line under this. And they won't draw a line under it if they just keep trying to cover up the facts and make sure people are left in the dark.
Exactly right. I don't think Swinney has been handling it well at all. I should have got this footage up, but as a parting gesture, I'll tell you the story. I watched some footage earlier of Nicola Sturgeon when she was First Minister being quizzed by school kids at a visit to the school. And some kids said, what about the cost of living? It affects all of us. Does it affect you, Nicola? And she said, well, to be fair, by normal standards, I earn a pretty reasonable salary. By the way, she was earning £140,000 and Peter Murrell was on £104,000 as the chief executive. Anyway, this kid goes, well, does it affect you? She said, to be fair, she said, well, look, we do okay, me and my husband. But she said, but I have to tell you, my husband does all the shopping. You can say that again. I'll get that footage up. We'll get you on again, Murdo, and I'll show it to you. But you couldn't make it up. You really couldn't. Murdo Fraser, Conservative MSP for Mid Scotland and Fife. Great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for your time. Let's go to break. When we come back, I'll read some of your messages. I don't know if we've got any WhatsApp voice notes, but if we have, I'll play them out. But I've certainly got some phone calls. So let's talk. It's good to talk on Talk. Give me a call, 0344 499 1000. We still might be able to get you on. So see you in a minute.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Your calls, your messages, your WhatsApp voice notes. Here's the first voice note. This is from Phil on Australia, Woke Australia. I talked to Samara Gill about that earlier. Here's Phil.
So a bloke in a dress can be discriminated against on application of employment because they want to get pregnant. And that would be discrimination against a man because they want to get pregnant. I would say, as an employer, I wouldn't give that person a job on the grounds that they're mad as a box of frogs, and therefore they're not mentally capable to be employed.
Good point, Phil. I think I would take the same approach as you. It's so mad. Males getting prejudiced against because employers fear they might get pregnant, even though they can't get pregnant. Welcome to the wonderful world of wokery. Here's Kev, also on Australia.
I've just listened to that bit about Australia, about trans women getting pregnant. Man, I've heard it all now. What is going on? And I thought this country was messed up with all that, but oh my God. Anyway, great show. I've heard it all now.
Thanks, Kev. I agree with you. It's like, what on earth is going on? It's pretty bad here. We know that wokery is the scourge of Britain, but down in Australia, it has caused that country to take leave of its senses. It really, really has. We'll do some more on that, I think, going forward. Shall we go to the phones? Let's talk to Laura in Wiltshire. Hi, Laura.
Hey, Cav. I mean, if Australia's mad, my lord. But I was really wanting to talk to you about this whole Tony Blair thing.
Yep.
Which is, I mean, I really am not a fan of Tony Blair.
Nor am I.
think he screwed up this country on so many. Let's not even go there.
Yeah.
However, what I love is the two bands of Labourites, the sort of upper middle class Islington, Hampstead people are clutching their pearls with excitement, and I'm going to keep it clean. They are beyond themselves that Tony is back in town. And then you get the socialists who are and they're the champagne socialists. And then you get the left who say, how very dare he? How very dare he say this stuff, which actually is pretty much what most of the opposition are saying these days. And he was pretty much their most successful politician ever. Yeah. And, you know, except on Brexit, I agreed with a lot of what he was saying today, because guess what? He's made enough money. He's not made enough money for him, but he's old enough, he's successful enough, and he's rubbed along enough with business to get that socialism doesn't work.
It doesn't work, exactly right. By the way, yeah, to be fair to him, he's a mad Remainer. He loves the EU, but he does say in this 5,600-word essay that we should not rejoin. So he's realistic about...
Did you read it? Have you read it all, Kev?
Well, I can't admit that I have, no. But I've sort of flicked through it. Have you read it all?
No, I mean, come on, we've all got a life.
Exactly right. Life's too short, but, you know,
I rely on talk to just you know, bring it down to the essentials for me.
Have you seen, Laura, though, how Andy Burnham is clearly furious about this? I keep saying this if you've been listening to the show. I think the subtext of Tony Blair's long, rambling essay is A, Keir Starmer and his government have been a catastrophe. Keir Starmer is useless. He has no sense of direction, no political belief system, is incoherent, has no idea, has been a disaster for 22 months. Well, we all agree with that. And his reasons are very good as well. But he also says that a continuing lurch to the left will be catastrophic for Labour. And what he means by that is, Tony Blair basically is essentially saying, politically, I hate Keir Starmer, he's useless, but this guy coming in, Andy Burnham, he will continue a lurch to the left that will be absolutely disastrous for this country and indeed for the Labour Party.
But that's why the socialists are so daft, because they never learn from their mistakes, do they?
No.
And you know, this guy has actually evolved a bit, are we allowed to say?
Yep.
And, you know, he realises that things like net zero, it's absolute madness.
It's a vote loser, that's for sure.
And it's ruining our industry, it's ruining
our economy,
else. Completely, and it's, you know, that and immigration, which nobody's talking about on the left, are the two things that are completely screwing us over. And guess what? You know, Burnham and co are just saying, how very dare he bring any of this up? Because they don't want to hear it. And I think they really believe it, Kev. I think they really believe it.
They do. Burnham is promising, threatening a long and considered response tomorrow to Tony Blair's essay, so that's something to look forward to. But basically he's complaining that Tony Blair never once mentioned inequality. So here we go, student activism, toy town socialism, that's what Burnham will bring to the party, all of which is pretty depressing. Laura, really good to talk to you, though, as always. Thanks for a great call. Laura in Wiltshire. Shall I play? I'll just give you a quick message before we go to break. Got more calls when we come back. Chris from Northumberland has written in to say, I think I've got Starmer all wrong. I thought he was a Blair glove puppet, but apparently not. But what is Starmer? He's not left, centrist or right. I don't understand what he is. Maybe that's his problem. He's nothing to everybody. I think that is his problem, Chris. Who is Keir Starmer? What does he stand for? What does he think he's been playing at for 22 aimless months? You know, it's just impossible. He has to go, but I think Burnham will make matters even worse. Let's go to break. More of your calls when we come back. Stay where you are.
If your other half came home with £125,000 worth of motorhome, wouldn't you go, darling, where did you get that from? Yeah. Have that turned up on the driveway? Where did you get the motorhome from? It's a very expensive motorhome. £81,000 Jaguar, Volkswagen Golf, partly funded with stolen cash, luxury watches over 9,000 quid, Mont Blanc pens, a £3,232 coffee machine. What was the man doing?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Here's a voice note from Craig on the migrant crisis.
Just an idea. All these young men that are choosing to come here on the boats, make them do 2 years national service. As soon as they get here, they can have their £40–50 a week, is whatever they're getting, but they've got to spend 2 years in our armies and our armed services. Let's see how many of them jump in the boats then, Kevin, shall we?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of quite like that. I'd rather just sort of lock them up or something, you know, put them in a detention centre and send them back. I mean, I think there are problems in putting foreigners into our army, if you see what I mean. But, yeah, I mean, something tough needs to be done. So thank you, Craig. Let's read another. This is Ian says, if I ever bought a salt and pepper set for £2,000, I'd expect it to do the Times crosswords and cook the meal in the first place too. That's from Ian. Yeah, it's a Lalique. It's a French kind of glassware firm. It's very collectible, so it holds its value. I've got a friend who collects Lalique. It's really expensive, a lot of it. Well, as you can tell, £3,000 for a couple of salt and pepper grinders. Let's go back to the phones. Let's talk to Mandy in Cambridgeshire. Hello, Mandy. What would you do about the migrant crisis, the small boats crossing the channel?
Hi, nice to speak to you first time, Kevin.
Oh, welcome to the show.
Welcome. Yes, so I'd just like to quickly go back to the Burnham. I do want to go to the immigrants, but I just got to go back to the Burnham. Could you imagine that man on the world stage?
Yeah, well, you better get used to the idea. I think he will be before long.
My goodness. To be truthful, I don't disrespect people's backgrounds, but oh my anyway.
Yeah.
So we'll go back to the borders. So I heard something that just in the back of my head, sort of like we had French passport control this side that were delaying people going through the Eurostar from our country.
Yeah.
So effectively they were on our border, so they were on our territory.
Right.
So they were quite happy for us to go over when we went and sent all the boats over.
Right.
So what's wrong with us going into their territory and stopping all the boats that shouldn't be coming over here?
Well, because they won't let us.
Well, but why not? So we allow them
because they're French.
Well, we won't. À la français, hey?
Well, the French aren't going to do anything to help us solve the migrant crisis. The only thing they want to do is get rid of the migrants, wave them au revoir and tell them have a nice life in England. Get the hell out of our country. All they want to do is get rid of them.
Honestly, but don't let them in then. I mean, they've got plenty. I mean, they've got, 2-3 borders that could let them in. I mean, it's shocking. It really, really is shocking that. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, this is like a dangerous. I mean, I wouldn't want to come over on a little boat across there.
It's 21 miles. It's not very far. You can see England from France and vice versa.
You can, but I seriously wouldn't want to get on a boat. I wouldn't want to do it in a car.
Well, on a calm day, well, they all think it's worth the risk, and you know, tragedies happen. But if you think about it, relatively few compared to the total that have come across on small boats since this started.
I was watching them embark, should I say, from the beaches the other day. You'd got a woman stood there in a little woolly hat with a headlight on, helping them into the water.
Yeah.
Because, oh goodness me, we need to go on the Lily Light White, and Do you know what I mean? All sort of like pacify. It's absolute. We cannot carry on.
Here's what I think we should do. I don't think trying to get the French to help is a waste of time. We're wasting a lot of money on that. They're never going to properly help. I just think we need to send the migrants this message. Once you get here, you won't be put into a 4-star hotel. You won't be given 50 quid a week benefits. No. You won't get free doctors, free lawyers, free dentists. We will detain you and then deport you. Once they get that message, they won't come, Mandy. It's as simple as that.
All the while we've got lily-livered ladies.
Yeah. Well, we're just rolling out the red carpet for them. Hence, they carry on coming. Mandy, I've got to move on, but very nice first call. Thank you. Call me again. Mandy in Cambridgeshire. Let's go to William in North Yorkshire. What would you? How are you, William? What would you do about the boats?
Hi, Kev. What I do with the boats, ex-military, 30 years. What I do with the boats is, if people give me the power, I'll sort it in 24 hours.
Sorry, you could sort it in 24 hours. How would you do that?
How would I do that? I'd have the 3 heads of the armed forces in my office: Navy, Air Force and Army. Here's what's happening. Navy deploys into the channel with boarding parties on board. Everything would be recorded for legal purposes.
Mm-hmm.
We'd be given 3 warnings by loudspeaker or whatever. If they don't turn back, the 4th warning would be a shot across their bows.
You know, the Navy have said they won't have anything to do with this because they think they think it's against maritime law that their intervention would put lives at risk.
Our country at the minute is getting invaded. Hitler couldn't do it in the 40s.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying, but what I'm saying, when you say I'll bring in the Navy have refused to get involved.
Well, if that's the case, I'll sack the head of the Navy and then bring some
I'm with you on that one, but this is what we're up against. Nobody wants to get involved in this crisis. And
the Army, I'm afraid to say, Kev, all the immigrants in HMOs and hotels would be put in Army camps. Army would cordon off these camps. I'd take their phones off them. I'd take their money off them. And if they tried to break out, shot.
Well, that's a bit of an extreme way of dealing with it. I don't think we would want to go that far, would we? But, you're right. We do need some tough measures, and they're not happening right now. William, good call. Thank you very much. William in North Yorkshire there. We don't suggest shooting migrants, by the way. I just want to stress that. Let's go to Christine in Inverness. Hello, Christine. You want to talk about our friend Mr. Morell, the big spending SNP Chief Executive?
Indeed. Good evening, Kevin.
Hi.
Now, I don't want to blind you with numbers, but they are quite important.
Mm-hmm.
Between 2017 and 2020, £670,000 was ingathered and ring-fenced for the next independence referendum.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? In 2020, questions were raised because the SNP funds were down to £97,000. So, this is all easily researched, actually. Mr. Murrell kindly loaned the SNP £107,000 of his own money to help with cash flow.
That's interesting. This was at the time, I remember, Christine, because Nicola Sturgeon, as the leader of the party, she had to go public. I remember she was going on TV and said there's nothing to worry about financially. Everything is in good order. Well, it wasn't, was it?
No, and I'll tell you why. Because the then treasurer of the SNP, a man and a serving MSP at the time, Douglas Chapman, resigned because Mr. Morrell wouldn't let him have sight of the books.
Is that right?
Yeah, you can check it out.
Well, I think we might know why now, right, Christine?
Once upon a time I was a researcher, so I'm quite careful.
Yeah.
So, So anyway, she then, Miss Sturgeon, then became treasurer. And she was treasurer of the SNP at the same time that the auditors that they had employed for many years also resigned. They couldn't find auditors in Scotland who would take them onto their books. And eventually, after about a year, they found auditors in Manchester.
Right. So let me just ask you a quick question, Christine. Do you when Nicola Sturgeon says, I knew nothing about this extraordinary influx of bizarre, luxury items that he's bringing into the house, 3,000 quid salt and pepper pots, something like about 12 grand's worth of coffee machines and so on and so forth. When she says she had no knowledge of this and no suspicion, I don't believe her, do you?
I would find that extremely hard to believe. Another fact that hasn't been brought up is Mr. Murrow co-owns a villa in Portugal.
Oh, does he?
Algarve, with his sister.
Oh, right.
And that's where the model stroke started.
Okay, so we ought to have a look at that as well. That's very interesting stuff. Christine, I've got to move on because the show's nearly over, but thank you for an excellent call. Call me again. Christine in Inverness. In the studio is Peter Cardwell. Hi.
Hi, Kevin. My favourite detail of that are the hairdryers, the Dyson hairdryers that Peter Murrow bought. Why does a bald man need hairdryers? Could it be that there's someone else living in the house who maybe wanted to use a hairdryer, but of course had no knowledge of anything that was in there?
My favourite... exactly. My favourite moment in this bizarre soap opera was yesterday, the current SNP leader, John Swinney. Mr. Swinney, how do you react to the fact that Nicola Sturgeon, throughout her 10-hour police interrogation, replied to every question, no comment? He literally, without irony, replied, no comment.
Yep, I remember that.
Couldn't make this stuff up.
It was a classic. Kevin, I don't know about you. How have you been on the phone to HMRC recently? Have you waited a long time on hold to HMRC by any chance?
Well, put it this way, I have to deal with HMRC a lot.
Yes.
But, yeah.
Well, I can give you a tip.
Okay.
Declare you're trans, because trans people have got a specific hotline that they can ring